It's time for Windows Weekly. Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell are here. There's news of Windows 11, Microsoft 365, Microsoft's 50th anniversary, and a farewell to a legendary Windows columnist. All of this and more coming up next on Windows Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell, episode 923, recorded Wednesday, March 12th, 2025. The Bouche is amused. Hello, you winners and dozers. It's time for Windows Weekly. So glad to see you, Leo Laporte, on this side of the Atlantic.
Yep.
I'm
not on any side of the Atlantic.
Under the pond is Paul Thurrott. He's in Mexico City. Hello, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Good to see
Unfortunately, Mexico City is over a pond. It's part of the problem they have.
It's a swamp, right?
Yeah. It's a hollow space below the city that's slowly crumbling in on itself.
They never filled that in. They just kind of.
It's supposed to be filled with water, and then they started using the water, and now it's filled with air. And I don't know if you are
they
up on
fracked
structural
it up.
materials. Yeah, it's not good. But we have wavy buildings. That was fun.
If you suddenly disappear, we'll know why.
I know. It will just sink a little bit. Yeah. 13 centimeters a year, if I'm not mistaken.
I could do that with my chair, but
yeah.
Also with us from British Columbia, also on this side of the pond. So really, the whole pond thing was completely misguided.
Yeah, no, we're pretty much all North America.
We're all here.
Mexico, because what is this? 500 sinkholes have been registered in Mexico City between 2017 and 2020. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Those are just the ones they register.
That's it.
This is a registered sinkhole.
I've seen sinkholes that don't get fixed by the street guys. So I don't know what's going on here, but.
Well, it's still a great place to live. And we were talking, your ears must have been burning because Paul on Twit, Mike Elgin was saying how lucky Paul is in living in the culinary capital of the world.
As I jokingly said to you before the show, I mean, he was a major influence that kind of led us in this direction. So, Mike,
nice.
So we're going to start on a sad note. Weren't we talking about Woody Leonhard just the other day? I feel like we were.
Huh? I don't remember.
Like whatever happened to him, right?
Oh yeah. So we're still trying to piece this one together, but unfortunately, Woody, whose real name I did not know was Gregory Forrest Woody Leonhard, passed away last week at the age of 73. So
very young.
Yeah. He is one of my primary writing influences, him and Jerry Pournelle. I would say Charles Petzold to some degree, but he was the author of the first Windows programming book I ever got, ahead of even owning a PC, actually. And it was kind of lighthearted and casual and fun to read and not like other technical books. And it was kind of interesting to me that you could write like that, you know? So,
interesting.
Later, I wasn't intending to become a writer at that time, but when I did later, that was a big influence.
He wrote for Computer World.
Yeah, right.
Woody's Window Watch, which started in 1998.
So I will never be able to explain the whole entomology of this exactly, but you know about Windows Secrets, the newsletter and the books with Brian Livingston, and I helped co-author one of those books and actually wrote briefly for that newsletter. There's also Fred Langa, who wrote the Langa list, right?
Right.
And
I always think of as Flanga.
Flanga, yep. So at some point, those things were rolled into Ask Woody, and somewhere around, I don't know, 2020-ish, I found this out after I wrote about this. He actually retired from Computer World, at least. I think just retired in general.
We talked about this. I'm pretty sure it was on this show that he had moved to Thailand.
That's true. Yes. So, right. And my understanding.
Just a month ago, we were saying, whatever happened to him? Don't you remember that?
No,
or maybe it was because I do other shows. It might have been on Twitter or something.
No, we definitely talked about it. You're right. The Thailand thing is correct. And I've only interacted with this guy sporadically over the years. I don't believe I've ever met him in person, which I feel bad about. But because, I'd like to be able to say, hey, just so you know, you were kind of a big deal for me. But
there's There he is. The last picture we saw of him in Thailand.
So the editor, the person who was in charge of this newsletter now reached out to me, as he did to many other people, to try to find anyone who knew anything about his full life story, and nobody does. And he's in touch with the family. That they don't seem particularly interested in this, but there is there'll probably be more information at some point. But I heard most recently that he had actually come back from Thailand when the COVID restrictions eased up, and then I believe he has been in Tennessee since.
So Ask Woody, the newsletter, is still around, but obviously others have taken it over. Not even since his death, but much earlier.
For years,
a few years ago.
Yep.
Yeah,
and a lot of consolidation with other newsletters. So I'm glad those guys are still keeping us going. And I don't know, it's too bad.
He was one of the early guys. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Jerry Pournelle in your show, in your article about this, and who really kind of started, and Dvorak, who were kind of renowned columnists who made everybody kind of interested in this whole thing.
Every person you just mentioned influenced me to some degree. When I first started doing something I called When Info Shorts Takes, like a 25 years, whatever that was, I wanted to model it after the back of the magazine. I don't remember if it was PC Mag or PC World that Dvorak did, where it'd be little paragraphs.
Inside
about
Track,
things.
It was called.
Yeah. And they would have little bolded bits where so I remember I put.
Sometimes it seemed randomly bolded, but okay.
So the first one I put together, I did it in that style, and whoever was the editor at Penton, whatever Penton was called that back then, was like, no, you can't do it like this. You should have little titles for each one of these things instead. And I was like, all right. So anyway, that went off in its own direction. But Chaos Manor, obviously Jerry Pournelle. And then I'm a little, I can't, it's weird saying the word younger now because I'm not younger in any way now, but I was a little behind generationally with him. So I think in the late 80s, early 90s at the latest, I had started buying books that were compilations of the articles he wrote for Chaos Manor in Byte. And it was a fascinating kind of time machine thing at the time for me. And then I was a Byte subscriber for many years too. But he used to describe himself as potentially, the first blogger, because he was essentially doing what bloggers did much later on, but in the 70s, right?
Yeah. I just was doing some research. Mm-hmm. His first book was self-published because of his bad experiences with Word for Windows 1.0,
which he became an expert in, right?
Yeah, and he wrote a 280-page electronic book with bugs and workarounds.
That's great.
And that led him to be asked to write his first real book, Windows 3.1
which,
Programming.
By the way, was that first book that I bought.
Read.
And the thing that was amazing about this now, it's weird because lately, because Bill Gates just came up with the first volume, of his autobiography, he mentioned some stuff where I said, I'm going to go back and reread some things. So I reread Gates by Stephen Manas. I've been rereading.
Oh, that's a great
Hard
book.
Drive by, I think, Paul Andrews is the author, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And one of the two mentions how, I'm going to get this wrong, but I think it was Windows 2 something and then 3.0, both had this kind of small runtime. So you could put it on like a disk and include it with a book. And in this case, what he had was a fully running version of Windows 3.1 with Word, and it allowed you to run the Word basic examples that were in the book.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and this might have been my first experience, because my wife had a 286 at the time, and I do remember trying to put Windows on it. It must have been this one. I don't remember, but it would draw it so slow. I've told the story where it would draw the line around the menu, and then each line would fill in, and then each word would fill in. It was super slow. But yeah, that was my.
Steve Martin told us in an interview he did a few years back that the first time he used a word processor, he was writing the Three Amigos, and if he wanted to move a speech from one part of the page to another, he would move it, then would get up, go have a cup of coffee, wander around the apartment, come back, and there it would be. We forget. You forget. We're surrounded by smart stuff now that's so easy to use. We forget how bad
this
it
is
was.
A bit of an exaggeration, but I know when I had an Amiga, when I was younger, before the internet became a big thing, for years and years and years, I would be up until 3:00 in the morning doing something on this computer. And I can't tell you what that was for the most part. I mean, I can sort of, but
Just
before the internet, I don't even
futzing
remember,
around.
Yeah, well, I was doing. Yeah, I was right. I was
You're
teaching
balancing your
myself
checkbook. That's
C
what everybody
programming
uses.
and things like that, and
Typing in basic programs from Compute Magazine, things like that.
No, that was earlier. I used to do that too, but
Yeah.
Or not even basic. They would be like that. Like Run magazine would have like a weird code you could do instead.
Oh,
And
God.
you had to write the codes, and then it never ran the first time. So you had
It's probably hex. Yeah.
Wow. Probably ridiculous.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I take it back. Steve Gibson just texted me. It wasn't on this show. Steve Gibson and I were talking about Woody and how he had ended up in Thailand and whatever happened to him.
Because we have brought
That's
this up.
right.
This has come up. I just don't remember it recently, but the Thailand thing with him has come up.
Thank you, Steve. That's right.
Okay.
That makes sense because Steve, like you, was a columnist in the early days. He, his column was fantastic. You, Steve, Dvorak, Pournelle, and Woody, what was so different from all the other stuff people like me were doing, you had voice. You had personality. You could tell there was a person there.
I've not read anything you wrote, but please don't undersell the fact that you also had a voice. And my voice
is better on the radio than it is.
Yeah, you have a great
tape
voice. No, but I also mean a voice in a personality sense, because I used to watch you in the afternoon. Like when I went back to school after buying this book and trying to become a programmer, I would come home in the afternoon and watch whatever various shows. And at some point, Tech TV, or I don't know if it was a predecessor to Tech TV would come on. And it was you and Ed, right? Ed
Bott?
Who was the guy you were on?
Patrick Norton.
Patrick Norton, sorry.
Yeah.
And Ed Norton's an actor. Patrick Norton.
All the Nortons are related.
All the Nortons, yeah. And Peter Norton from our industry.
Right.
No, but I remember, I would watch this thing, and I don't know, a friend came, something. I talked about it, and I said, I'm already up on everything. Like I don't feel like I'm going to learn anything, but I just really enjoy this show.
Yeah.
Like I left it on. I would just leave it on,
Yeah.
So, I mean, you
talk about
absolutely
the
had a
same
voice.
thing. I think that's probably true. A lot of people who listen to this show and all of our shows is
no one's going to learn anything from me. That's for sure.
They hear the news, but it's as much companionship. It's as much hearing people who share your interests talking about things you're interested in.
It's a community kind of thing almost.
Yeah. I mean, Jerry Pournelle was always talking about S100 buses and adding cars and stuff. I couldn't care less.
I wasn't part of the world then, right? So I read about that stuff later and was fascinated by it.
Yeah.
I will say in his case, I not only got to meet him, but had some awesome interactions with him and his son. And I really, really enjoyed those times. But Dvorak, I mean, I probably in passing, and I never met Woody Leonhard. I feel bad about that because he, I
don't think many people did.
Influence.
That's the thing that's most interesting about Woody is he is still kind of an enigma,
mystery,
even to people who worked with him. Even to people computer world.
In his blog, they talked about he lived in Phuket from 2000 to 2014. Like,
right?
No wonder you didn't meet him.
Right.
Like he was.
But nobody knows why he moved to Thailand or why he came back. And I mean, it's all a mystery. So,
yep.
What's sad is he, 74 is a little, especially as I reach that age.
I don't know. That's kind of a ripe old age. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you saying something else?
No, I mean, it's kind of, normal life expectancy, I guess, but it feels like too young. It really does.
Yep. Yeah. It always does.
Had he stopped writing completely?
So I think I think so. After I wrote that, I kept looking, right. And I was interacting with the guy from the newsletter a little bit. And I did find his last column from Computer World where he announced his retirement or whatever. Yeah. Susan Bradley took over for him. She's also part of the Ask Woody still today. I know a lot of people. Lance Whitney's over there. Mary and Simon Bassan are over there, who I know very well.
Now I remember. This is what Steve and I were talking about. This is, so no wonder you don't remember it. It was on security.
It didn't happen to me. Yeah. Well, thank God I don't remember it.
But
I remember it vividly.
Steve, we were having this conversation not so long ago, a couple of weeks ago.
We have discussed this. Like this, Thailand has come up on the show, but it's been a while.
Yeah. So in a way, it's more interesting because he was an enigma. We wouldn't have been talking about it so much if he.
Right. When I go, it's gonna be like finally.
Yeah, Paul's gone.
I never thought he'd shut up.
We knew way too much about him.
A little too transparent. He's like, Yep.
They'll say the same about me. All right. Well, it's not. I'm glad we could talk about Woody and the good old days. It was a different time. I think I feel kind of bad for anybody under 40 who really didn't grow up in the same way the three of us did with technology.
Yeah, these are all the people I read.
Reading those books, like I said, the early days of Microsoft and the industry, and as you get into the 90s, of course, the internet happens and Netscape and everything. But I used to read those when I was young, and I always thought, man, I missed it. It's over. Like this happened. And it would, the books about Apple as well, and IBM right at the time when they were still big in the PC and what were the PC, I guess. I thought I missed it, and then the internet happened. I was like, oh, okay. There's another wave. Yeah, we can ride this wave now. This is okay.
And now for young people, you're not missing it because AI is happening, right?
I know.
There's a whole new, and us old timers are looking at it going, By the way, there are some books that have lived forever.
That's right.
And this is one of them.
You can kill a mid-sized animal with that book.
Oh, wow.
That book exists because Borland did not thoroughly document their own APIs at the time.
Right. And it needed to be. This is the Delphi 3 Super Bible, which is in effect the manual for Delphi. I mean, it's everything you need to know if you want to use Delphi.
It's an API reference,
which was Turbo Pascal in its
Object Pascal into
Object
that.
Pascal.
And then, and they had a C product, and I'm not going to get this right. It's close. It was Object Windows Desktop, maybe something like that.
Wow.
That was their class library. And so the VCL, the Visual Component Library in Delphi, was sort of the equivalent. But the language was, by the way, it was the original Rust. When you think about it, the Object Pascal, you couldn't screw up memory if you wanted to.
You couldn't screw up with it, yeah. I think we could do like they do in some British churches, where you have the Bible open
yes,
in the
reading
back of the church,
like
and you just
at a wedding.
every day you turn the page.
Or you go to a wedding, and you're right. Okay, actually, that's better. I was gonna say when you go to a wedding, if someone reads from the Bible, it will always be like someone's best friend. 9 times out of 10, it is love is never selfish. It's always the same quote. For me, it would be like I just forgot it. No, it's like the T object is the root of all objects in the VCL. It is the object from which all objects descend.
Okay, every day a new page.
Yep.
And by the way, this will only take us 3 years.
It's going to take longer than that. That's
on .NET Rocks, we used to do, we still do the bit, but we used to do a bit called Better Know a Framework. And it was literally calling classes out from the .NET framework because it's so huge. But you eventually get through
those days when, you had all these API, or maybe it was an SDK, I don't know, or function calls or library calls, and you had these giant manuals. I have Apple's Inside Macintosh.
Yes, I owned all of those. And then, by the way, those first, I don't know, 5, 7, whatever it was, that's also Pascal.
That's right.
It was Pascal based. Pascal. Yep.
I learned Pascal because of that. I loved Pascal. I did too. Actually, I thought Pascal was a great language.
The worst teacher I ever had was I took Pascal in my senior year of high school. They just started offering computer programming classes. So in my junior year, it was basic, and I got an A+. And the teacher was so horrible in the Pascal class, I almost flunked out of it. And I used to just copy my friend's homework. And then one day he decided he was going to call me out in front of the class. And he's like, maybe you could explain to me why your homework is always identical to Dave's, And I said, well, yeah, I can explain it. I'm actually struggling in this class. So Dave is taking time out of his day every day. We meet at lunch and we go over the homework together. So he knows that I understand what's happening. And that's why they look the same, because we do them together. And he says, I hope the rest of you are paying attention to this. And I wish the rest of you would take this class as seriously as Paul does. So then I later wrote the Delphi Super Bible, like you showed there. And I'm like, I wanted to send it to this guy and be like, go F yourself, you idiot. You're a terrible teacher. Just a jerk,
I wrote the book.
Yeah.
Is Delphi
he left at the part
Pascal?
where it's like, I found the teaching here wholly inadequate, so I've really had to go to a different source.
I had to go into it as a career. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It does look like Pascal a little bit. Yeah.
What's that?
I'm just wondering how Pascal-like it is. I see colons.
Yeah, well, it is Pascal. It's Object Pascal.
It is Pascal. Okay.
Yeah, it's an object-oriented Pascal class library.
Nicholas
Framework.
Wirth. Never knew. Mr. Wirth, Professor Wirth, I am going to write the book. Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, that thump you just heard was me putting it on the
I know, just dropping it lightly,
Don't
causing a
hurt me.
3.1 earthquake for the surrounding area.
All right, we're going to take a little break. Come back. We have actually, I don't need to take a break. Let's keep going. Let's talk about Windows. We haven't really
Windows.
Yeah, it's been a while.
haven't delved into the Windows thing yet.
As I do so often, forgot that yesterday was Patch Tuesday, but yesterday was Patch Tuesday. So,
Well, if you forget, when Microsoft will remind you.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, one of my machines was rebooted this morning.
Yeah, they'll let you
yeah.
know.
So we've already talked about everything that's in this update, but 24 and 23 H2 both got different updates, but it's the same contents, right? So jump lists off of app icons in the taskbar that support documents, so you can access those, and share, if I'm not mistaken. Let me look at this one actually before I say that. Is there a way to, I don't have anything with documents, never mind. Anywho, I believe share is part of that. If not, that will be next month. There's some Windows Spotlight stuff for both lock screen and desktop, just about finding more about the image and so forth. If you see that start backup icon in a OneDrive folder that you're not backing up, you can actually pause that. Not turn it off. They're not that nice, but baby steps, I guess. At some point, it will come back on. But if that irritates you, you can turn it off. Multiple camera support, which is kind of cool. So you can stream 2 or more cameras at the same time, and then have that be a view that any app should be able to use. So I've not tried that yet, but that's kind of neat. And I would say that's most of the important stuff. But yeah, well, that's most of it. But I do, actually, let's talk about this first because, let's not. Who cares? So in a couple of minutes, we're going to talk about some of the things that have occurred over Canary Beta 23H2 and then Dev and Beta 24H2. And actually, we're kind of getting back on this faster, more, stuff's happening. So this is probably the third year in a row that I'll sort of wonder aloud whether we're not going to get something different later in the year, meaning a new version of Windows or a major new version. Maybe. We don't know. Later on, we'll talk about some big AI updates that are coming on the client side. It's possible they might tie it to that. I think originally the plan for Windows 12 was for it to be kind of the AI release, but then they realized, wait, we need to get this out everywhere. We have to force people to use it. So they kind of put the brakes on that. But I do wonder if it's starting to speed up again. It feels like it is, especially when we get into the insider stuff, which represents things we'll see in future Patch Tuesday. So January was nothing because December, everyone's gone. They didn't do anything for that. But now we have 2 months worth, and, they're what I would, functionally medium quality, whatever, or medium number of new items and so forth. But I think it's going to get bad. I think April, May, et cetera, it's going to speed up again. It looks like so.
The best proof that Windows 10 will actually go out of support in October would be at Windows 12.
Yeah, there you go. Although I as dumb as Windows as a service was back when they first announced it, especially, and as bad as it was for the first couple of years, I did sort of appreciate the message, which was we Microsoft want to get as many users as possible on the latest version of Windows, which at that time was Windows 10. Except that it wasn't, right? Because Windows 10 was revved every 6 months, and there were at 1.6 or 7 or 8, even whatever supported versions of Windows. It was the opposite, right, of what they wanted to do.
I appreciate also that they were experimenting with trying to iterate faster on Windows. They were pressing a team that wasn't used to that, to doing something different.
That's right.
And then you can't rev an operating system like an SDK, and that's what they were doing.
You can. It's just terrible. And the reason it's Richard knows this better than anybody. But the problem is you're tying new features for developers to specific versions of Windows 10 in that case, which means no developer is ever going to use them because they can't be guaranteed that everyone has them. So with the Windows App SDK, they separated church and state, so to speak. And now the developer features, the new APIs, et cetera, are all on their own schedule. They're not tied to a specific Windows version. They will work on any supported Windows version.
They learned.
Yeah, it took a while. It took a while.
Over on the run-as side, we had this period where our developers are asking us to update Windows in the office
Right.
So that we can
run
deploy
or
this new
deploy,
app
yeah.
that's running WinUI
That's right.
3X, right?
Yep. Yeah. So that was it's one of those things you look back at it later and you're like, this should have been obvious, but
Yeah.
But they picked it up. I would say, I mean, maybe you know more about this than I do, but I feel like, where .NET is on a very steady cadence, one might say a little too steady, or at least maybe a little too aggressive, or however you want to say it. The Windows App SDK stuff is off in Fantasyland. I don't know what they're doing. Like there are multiple pre-release, experimental, whatever they're calling them, versions of this thing out in the world, but the stuff that they announced for AI developers last May at Build is not unstable, and there's no indication it's going to be there anytime soon. I don't know what they're doing other than taking a really long time to do anything. I don't know what's going on over there, but at least it's not tied to a version of Windows. I guess I don't know. You win some, you lose some. I don't know.
Well, and the point of the insiders, especially stuff like Canary, was to experiment, right? Like I'm kind of delighted the idea there might be experiments in Canary that get reverted.
Yep. Yeah. And every once in a while, even in some of the other channels, they'll use that language. We're experimenting with ... One thing that might be considered that is actually in the next thing we're going to talk about, but it's actually, there probably is a Canary feature. Yeah, I like the idea of putting UI in front of people and saying, "Hey, is this better, worse, different?" And letting people kind of vote on it. It's not always that transparent or good, but yeah, I think my bigger issue, though, I guess, or my bigger takeaway is just that there's this kind of constant churn of change, and just beating the dead horse, so to speak. I feel like for the past several years, I've been kind of saying the same thing, which is just, I'm not sure Windows needs a constant cadence of change,
Yeah. No, I think in general, we're starting to feel like operating systems are going the way of stuff like microcode and UEFI, where what you want out from it is just a stability. We don't care about anything else.
That's right. I mean,
but
no
also,
one gets it.
The shift towards Microsoft being a cloud company has messed with the Windows team. They've been the center of the universe for Microsoft for 30 years. And suddenly they're not. And on one hand, that's freeing. Like, you should be able to go experiment now. On the other hand, it's like your best and brightest went to work on Azure because that's where the action is.
There's also like the 7 stages of guilt phenomenon or grief phenomenon where you deny that you're not the center for a while, and then you kind of evolve, or in this case, maybe devolve into a new situation. But yeah, it's very clear that Windows is not the primary concern of anybody with any cloud at all at Microsoft.
Yet we all still have to run an operating system.
Yeah. I keep mentioning the past for some reason today, but in addition to those books I've been rereading that we mentioned with Woody, I've also been rewatching these, like Computer History Museum has these oral histories where they bring in people like Dave Cutler, which this is the one I have been watching lately. Ave Tavanian from Apple, who Mark Kernel and OS 10, et cetera. And these are the vital histories, but you kind of forget, and like like Leo said earlier, like how different things were. But in Dave Cutler's case, they asked him, "Do OSs matter anymore? Are we going to quickly move on to something else?" And the point he kind of made was, VMS is still running today. So in that sense, yes, they do matter. And he also made the case, and he's correct. I mean, there's fundamentally 2 operating systems in the world, and one runs a Unix or Unix-like kernel, and one runs an NT or NT-like kernel. And all the phones and a lot of the IoT stuff is Linux and infrastructure servers, et cetera. And he's like, these things could go forever. So we may not see or need that level of a foundational architectural OS development, like the fresh, like greenfield OS development, when Microsoft hired away Cutler and his team in 88, 89, whatever that was, it took them 5 years-ish to bring NT to market, and really 10 years to make it be viable for every, for mainstream or more for mainstream. But, these things take time. What's the payoff? They're running to the money, right? That's why we see the AI thing happening today. When mobile happened, Apple made what today I would say was the right decision. I wasn't sure at the time, but to take their Unix, their FreeBSD, OS 10, whatever, and chop stuff off until it was small enough to run on this device, and then add touch to it, right? Smart. It worked out great, and they had a great foundation there. So I don't know. I don't even know what we're talking about anymore. All right, so in the Insider program, to your experiment point, there was a Canary build last week, I believe, that they're experimenting with what I would say is a ridiculous feature that nobody needs. So it's almost certainly going to make it into Windows, which is that in the recommended section of the Smart menu, which isn't super smart in Windows 11, in addition to recommending apps that you may want to install from the store, it will recommend two apps that it feels will go together well side by side on the screen that you already have installed. And their example, of course, is WhatsApp and File Explorer, which are terrible example of what you might do with this. I mean, I think the best use case for side by side apps is reading, taking notes, watching a video, taking notes, that whatever it might be, or here are my notes, I'm writing my final article, right? I don't know that side-by-side apps are a big deal for most people. I think most people run apps full screen, even on a big computer screen, I bet. But okay,
they still have Windows Snap, right? I mean,
that's what it's for, yeah.
Snap them.
You can snap them. You can snap them different ways. There's all kinds of different things. But like so much in Windows, I don't think a lot of people use that stuff. Unlike a lot of the stuff they've added to Windows 11, I actually do see the value in it. I'm not dumping on Snap. I think the Snap functionality is a great idea. I think the people that use it love it. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But
really, I thought everybody used it. Is that a weird thing to use Snap? On a big screen, it makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
I mean,
it does.
Laptop,
Of course
I guess
it does.
because a lot of people are on laptops now.
Yep.
And so you don't have a lot of real estate. You go full screen. So that's certainly how I use mine.
The trends here are kind of strange for Snap because we went widescreen with computer screens for a long time because of media, because movies were widescreen. And for a long time, you could only get like 16 by 9 laptop screen. It was not ideal, but that would have been good for Snap.
Right.
But now we have 16:10, or if you have a Surface, obviously 3x2. It's actually not as good for Snap because it's skinnier.
Yeah.
But yes, obviously big screens. But I still look, Microsoft isn't super transparent about this anymore. But when they were still talking about this, their experience based on telemetry was that most people just run
full screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, I think that's laptops. I don't think that's, but maybe most people.
Yeah, but that is most people, right? I mean, that's most people. So I don't know.
There's certainly a 3x2 screen.
It's not great unless you like a skyscraper style window,
Yeah.
But
on my iPad, I always go full screen on everything and just swipe between.
Yeah. You have multiple displays. You could do 2 full screen displays side by side, which is effectively Snap. That works fine. The other change that they're making, and this one was in beta channel for 23H2, but it's also in beta dev for 24H2, which tells me this is happening, is they're adding a recommended section to the File Explorer home screen, for lack of a better term, that, if I'm reading this correctly, will actually replace the what do you call it? The quick access view, which is I could just look at that, Paul. I guess just look at the stupid screen. Which is at the top of the screen, the top of the window by default. And I think it's actually going to replace it. So if you have signed into Windows with a Enter ID account for the past possibly year or more, you would actually see this recommended section. And the idea there is that you're working possibly in a team of people on a project. So the recommended documents and other files would often be from these projects that you're part of, but not necessarily the only author of. They didn't add it for people who sign in with a Microsoft account, who are consumers, but now they are. And again, they don't actually say this explicitly, but based on the shot and the language of the post, I believe that they're actually going to get rid of the quick access view, which is duplicated in the navigation bar. So the folders that you have pinned, desktop, download, document, music, video, might be missing one by default, were replicated in the main home view, I guess we'll call it. But now they're not. I guess they're going away. So that's whatever. That's fine. It's fine, but it's kind of an interesting update.
Yep.
And then 24H2. So I talked about how all of a sudden there was a bunch of stuff happening, right? So I don't think this is unstable. I can't tell because I'm on the dev channel, but at some time in the past couple of months, they added not just live caption support, which was already pre-existing in as an accessibility feature in Windows 11, but live captions with live language translations with support for dozens of languages in both directions. So to date, the only way to see that is to have a Snapdragon X-based PC like the Surface laptop. And I think it's still not, I don't think it's unstable yet. But with this latest build, they have rolled it out to the AMD and Intel-based Copilot Plus PCs. So probably coming soon.
So that's Lunar Lake and
Zen 5, for lack of a
Zen 5,
better term. The recommended files for everybody, the recommended snap groups, the thing I just said, right? If actually, this is a truly useful feature. If you do sign in with a Microsoft account and you have not configured they call it, they have a weird term for this, an account proof. I think of it as like an authentication prompt or whatever, a way that you can, that it can determine it's you. Maybe if something is wrong with your account, right? Maybe you can't sign in. Maybe you have to do a 2FA type thing and you don't have your authenticator app or whatever it might be. You can set up one or more email addresses, one or more phone numbers as well. And if you don't have either of those installed or configured for your Microsoft account, but you use it to sign into Windows, you'll actually get a banner notification. It'll say, hey, you might want to secure this a little bit better, which to me sounds like a good idea. So that's good. Just kind of a way to remind people, hey, you should, you want to keep up on this. And then the final one, this is just kind of goofy, but maybe this is like the recommended section where it's just a recommended section of File Explorer where it will happen more broadly eventually. But they're adding something called top cards into what I think of as system about. So if you right click on the start button, and choose system, it goes to the page in the settings app that's setting system about, and it gives you information about your computer, right? So the device name, the processor, the RAM, etc. They're actually going to call that out in cards, which is, to me, looks a little bit like, remember Windows Vista had that scoring system for how powerful your system components were? You would get a score, like a Windows Experience Index, if I'm not mistaken.
That's
WEI
what that was the
score.
term. Exactly. Yeah.
So it looks a little bit like that, and it's going to separate out, RAM, CPU, GPU, whatever you might have. And I think it's just it's only going to be in desktop.
This gets really fun with 3 different chipsets and different MPU designs.
Yeah. So at first it's only for desktop users, and I don't know why. And it won't be rolling out to commercial PCs at first either. But so we're talking about gaming
desktop PC users, so like me. And
the type of people who might want to say, like, what exact NVIDIA graphics card did I have again? Right. And if only there was a score of some kind where I could determine whether or not I wanted to upgrade it. That would have been useful to keep, but they didn't. Anyhow, so that's coming, but for a limited subset of users. So I guess looking at this list, that's not dramatically different than we got in stable on Patch Tuesday. But remember, this isn't everything, right? So we've seen other dev beta builds over the past few weeks. I think we're going to start getting a lot of new features. I think we already have, but I think there's going to be more. So
I'm just amazed that we're not talking about a 25H2 yet.
Yeah. Wait, what year is this?
Right, 2500, Leo. Come on.
Okay.
No, so the first step in that direction, or whatever the next one is called, was when they started having the same build go to dev and beta. This is the beginning of the shift, right? So at some point, beta will shift firmly to 24H2, and that means that dev will switch to that thing, whatever it is.
Whatever the next one is, probably 25H2. I mean, it is March, like it's time.
I could not agree more. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I don't know I don't know. So a lot of times when Microsoft does this sort of thing where they use the term window, right? There's a window that's open for now. And in this case, the window lets you move between beta and dev without any repercussions, right? You can just switch, get the same build. It's no problem. If you want to get out of there, you can switch to beta and go to 23H2, right? Which is okay. So you're like, I'm out. Usually those close pretty quick, but I think we might be closing in on a month. It's been a while. So yeah, I don't know what's taking so long.
Well, we've known for a while, 24H2 was basically a new version of Windows. So it was a big fight. They really struggled with it, and they still are.
Maybe there is some I don't want to give him too much credit here, but maybe there's some thinking that we need to make sure this one's right before we move on. Make sure that, maybe that's.
But it would also speak to 25H2 should be a minor one.
Should be, unless they call it 12, right? So, we'll see.
Naming is
that
everything.
argument, if 24H2 was actually a new version of Windows, then 25H2 should be minor, which means 12 shouldn't be until 2026.
I want to take a little break right here. We'll talk about AI in just a bit. I do have a reminder that right after this show, if you're watching live, Intelligent Machines is coming up, and Ray Kurzweil will be our guest. This is one of the most interesting people I know. Yep. He has an 86% prediction rate. And he's made some wild predictions. He says we are going to have AGI by 2029 in 4 years now, and that the singularity
Leo, that's good though, because that's just enough time for your retirement savings to bounce back.
you know what I'm saying? You joke, but actually that's exactly
I'm sorry.
what I was
I'm
thinking.
sorry if that came off as a joke. I am.
It's not a joke. It's
not joking.
Sorry. And I might make it another 20 years because he says the singularity where we merge with machines, where we extend our capabilities beyond what genetics gives us, is only 20 years off. Is 20. This will be very interesting. And as I said, he's been amazingly right on in his predictions over the last 30 years. He's a fascinating guy. He's coming up in just a little bit, but we still
he's
got
like the Nostradamus of our era.
He invented the first text recognition stuff and the Kurzweil synthesizer for Stevie Wonder and on and on and on. Just amazing inventor. And I'm looking forward to talk. I'm all a little intimidated. I've talked to him 3 times before, but I'm still always intimidated when I talk to him because he's kind of smart. Let's take a little break. When we come back, we will talk a little more about AI and browsers. Did you try that browser I recommended last week?
You bet I did.
All right. Well,
I did an episode of Hands on Windows because of you.
Oh, I like it. I like it. That's the show that Paul does for everybody, but the videos in the club. It's like a quasi club show, and we really Micah does Hands on Macintosh that way and Hands on Tech and so forth. Good. We'll talk in a bit, but first I want us to talk about our sponsor for this portion of Windows Weekly, and that's the fabulous folks at 1Password. I know you know that name, but you may not know about their newest product, 1Password Extended Access Management. Now, this answers the question that, well, I think I know the answer to. Do your end users always work on company-owned devices, right? They only use the laptops you provide and the phones you provide. They never bring foreign devices into the network. They always use all the IT-approved apps and never anything of their own, They probably don't even watch YouTube when they're at work, right? Okay. We know the answer. So how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all these BYOD devices, running all these unmanaged apps? Well, there's a way. 1Password has the answer. Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. If you think of your company's security like the quad of a college campus, the nice brick paths between the buildings, those are the company-owned devices, the IT-approved apps, the managed employee identities. And then there are the paths people actually use, the shortcuts worn through the grass that are the actual straightest line from point A to B. The paths people really use, right? The unmanaged devices, the shadow IT apps, the non-employee identities like contractors. Problem is, most security tools only work on the happy little brick paths, but many security problems occur on the little muddy shortcuts. 1Password Extended Access Management is the first security solution that brings all these unmanaged devices and apps and identities under your control. It ensures that every user credential is strong and protected. 1Password, of course, knows how to do that. But it also ensures that every device is known and healthy, and every app is visible. It's such a great combination. 1Password is ISO 27001 certified. They have regular third-party audits. They exceed the standards set by all the major authorities. It's a leader in security. And this new 1Password extended access management is security for the way we work. For real today. It's now available generally to companies with Okta and Microsoft Entra. Still in beta, but available for Google Workspace customers. Secure every app, every device, every identity, even the unmanaged ones, at 1password.com/Windows Weekly. That's all lowercase Windows Weekly. 1password.com/Windows Weekly. And we thank them so much for their support of Windows Weekly. And we thank you for supporting us by using that address so they know you saw it here. 1password.com/Windows Weekly. Okay, Paulie. Press to talk. How exciting is that, huh?
Well,
Like a walkie-talkie.
in isolation, not that exciting. However,
Yes.
one thing I neglected to mention, or if I did, I only mentioned in passing, was that when Microsoft announced the new version of Copilot in Windows 11, which, by my estimate is the 17th version of the app. I don't, it's something like that.
Were you just counting the icons?
Yeah. And the second in which they claimed it was a native app, but in this case, it is a native app. I had learned something about this app that I don't think we discussed. And that was that moving to this new architecture, I hate to use that term, moving to this new app design was done so that they could add more features to the app. And one of the features I knew that was coming was something called Press to Talk, which they are now testing in the dev channel of the Windows Insider program. So yes, this is I think it's a way to quickly start Copilot in speech mode, where you're going to speak through a microphone and interact with it. So the conversation will be audio based instead of text based, right? But okay, not super exciting to me anyway. But it is one of also 17 apps that use Alt plus space, including one of my app picks today. Hilarious. There's that. They don't have any way to customize that to be your own keyboard shortcut. What was wrong with Windows Key plus C? It was.
I thought there was a Copilot key.
Well, not everyone has a Copilot key, and for you peasants that can't afford to buy, no, yeah. So Microsoft. Well, look, when they announced that Copilot key, I thought it was going to be only on certain models. It's like everywhere all of a sudden. So yeah, eventually we'll all have Copilot keys. But yeah, so for now we don't. And yeah, in that case, I believe you just hold it down, and that will start the voice interaction. So okay, I mean it's fine. It's fine. But I think the more interesting thing here is that this new design gives them the ability to do things like we talked about last week, including bring back those Windows actions, the Windows commands. I think we talked about phone integration. If you have an Android phone, you can do things with your phone as well. But the list of other features that I got from Raphael, by the way, I should say, is daily briefing, which was in the previous version but is gone. This is the audio podcast, like sort of Amazon Alexa like feature where it kind of talks about the day's news, in a really jaunty style. Literally a feature called Walkie Talkie. Integration with the Windows screen snipping, something called Windows Vision, Windows Core Audio, Windows Wake Word. It's like Windows Safe Word. Nice. Windows Pro enabled. No idea what that means, but possibly there are going to be certain Copilot features that will only work in Windows Pro because this isn't confusing enough. And something called Windows Context, which sounds a little bit like some of those AI features that we see on Copilot Plus PCs related to recall and click to do. I don't know. And then there's also, I should say, Windows File Upload and Windows. Oh, I said Windows Context. Sorry. I think Windows File Upload and Windows Context, I think technically are in Copilot today. They don't really reference them by name, but I think they're in there now. So there is a bunch coming. So we'll talk about this a little bit later in the show, but there is a consumer AI event coming up, and this might be tied to that. Maybe this is the launch time frame for these new features, much like the original Copilot for Windows 11 was launched at a special event in September 2023, if I'm not mistaken. Seems like a million years ago, but
yeah.
Do people, what do you guys, so there seems to be two ways two kind of primary paths to using AIs like Copilot. One is to chat with them, chatbots.
Yep.
And the other is, kind of more informational, to use it with your data, to query it. Do people like to? I guess they do. But it just feels like,
first of all, people, they think they're people now.
People? Who are these people?
No, I think we're a little early to know for sure. And it's interesting because even just within this year, right? Starting with DeepSeek, I always struggle with that term. We have this notion of reasoning models that spell out in front of you how they are getting to the answer.
Yeah.
Well, everyone loves that. So that's something OpenAI specifically hid from you.
Right.
But now what we've learned is actually this increases trust in the AI because we can kind of, So I think these things evolve. I will say that I'm going to talk a little bit.
But that's primarily a text mode because you don't want it to do that while you're chatting with it.
Look, my knee-jerk reaction when I saw what they called at the time Big Chat 2 years ago, whatever that was, when they first announced it, was, I'm sorry, you're telling me we're going back to a text-based interface?
Yeah.
40 actually years after the GUI kind of arrived? That didn't make any sense to me. That said, I mean, we do these short textual interactions all the time in messaging apps, in Google search, whatever. It is notable that Copilot or all of these AI, these chatbot things, seem to work well in a conversational context. And I think I'm positive I talked about this, but if I didn't, I'm going to during my tip. I've seen this with normal people, like mainstream non-technical people, and I've now heard about this from a guy who is more technical, where they walk around and I'm going for a walk, and what they want to do is offload some ideas onto ChatGPT or whatever, and they prompt it to say, "Look, just don't interrupt me. I'm just going to talk, but I want you to collect all this information." And when they get back, they're like, "All right, now why don't you summarize the ideas I have? Tell me which you think are the most viable." Right. So people are starting to do this. That to me is fascinating. And I distinctly
you used to do this with a little tape deck, and then you handed it to your assistant.
Exactly. It's like, you're like, click idea. A vampire, but it's in medieval times. It's crazy, whatever. Like, so there's like, right. So people,
that's why I wear this little B computer, because it's always listening, and I could say, "Hey, remind me to," or things like that.
Right. I've never done this, but I'm fascinated by it. Like, I actually do think this is. Remember when the little Bluetooth headsets first arrived? Probably right around the time.
Yeah,
of the Matrix,
you look, people are crazy talking into their.
You'd see a guy walking out talking to the air, and you're like, "Look at that insane person." Now we're used to it. Yeah. So now going forward, a lot of those people will be talking to AIs, and we won't think anything of it.
I felt a little guilty because I was doing this in the restaurant last night.
Yeah,
and the AI was talking back, and I felt like. Maybe that's rude.
You should say something like, like the guy comes over with the bill. You're like, "Hey, Copilot, based on my experience tonight at this restaurant, what do you think the bill should be or the tip should be?" And then it's like, "Oh, really?" I'm like, "Why don't you tell him?" And then,
I was thinking maybe I should tip Paul and Richard for an excellent show. What do you think a good tip would be for a couple of podcast hosts?
Here's a tip. Watch both ways when you cross the street.
I should mention that.
A good tip for a podcast can vary, but generally around 10-20% of the ticket price is a nice gesture. If you felt they did an exceptional job, leaning towards the higher end would be great. Consider what you think reflects their effort and quality of the show.
I have so many problems with that.
One is it sounds just like J.K. Simmons.
Which is unbelievable. Which, by the way, I kind of like, I have to say.
I love it. No, that's my choice. If I can't get Scarlett Johansson, I'll take J.K. Simmons.
No, he's good. Yeah, what's Troy? As Patrick says.
I want Mike Ehrmantraub actually from Better Call Saul, but I don't think he's available right now.
you know how everyone has stories, and then some. So I have some stories that are things I've never actually witnessed myself, but they were so good, they were in my brain. And you remember the show 30 Rock from the Third Rock from the Sun?
Oh, Third Rock from the Sun, yeah, with John Lithgow.
So aliens, right? The fish out of water, right? So someone teaches him how to tip. So he goes in a restaurant, he puts down a stack of $1 bills, and the waiter comes over. He says, "This is your tip. Every time you screw up, I'm going to take away $1."
Oh, that's smart.
Now, I've never seen this show. I've never seen that episode anyway, and I think that's one of the most hilarious things I've ever heard in my life. Brilliant. So I think, I just think like AI could be used like that. Like AI, like pay attention to this experience, and let me know. What do you think?
By the way, you're getting 10% tips.
Yeah, we underperformed. I get it. It's okay.
Yep.
All he did was put tea in water. Why? What? Anyway, which is pretty much what a podcast
But to be more serious, I think you're exactly right that what these are becoming, and this is the chat interfaces companions that you interact with and get advice from.
Literal companions, yeah. So they tried to. We're gonna, of course, we're gonna have an AI section later. But they, Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft tried with these digital assistants, these digital personal assistants, to achieve this type of interaction, right?
Right.
In the beginning, you would say some word, you'd ask it a question, it would come back, and that was the whole thing. And then eventually, they got kind of conversational, where it could remember the context and keep going, so you could ask it follow-up questions. But it was never super sophisticated. And now it is. Now it's really good. It's good enough that people are talking to it.
Close to her,
Yes.
That's what I really want. So in a way, I'm preparing for that day because they're not that useful. But the fact that I'm recording every interaction I have, everything that's going on, my emails, my calendar stuff, I'm hoping, this may be 5-10 years down the road, but that this database that I'm building will be of value, right?
You're going to be in a supermarket and you're going to be done. And you're going to walk to the aisle where you pay and it's going to say, hey,
you forgot
the butter or whatever.
Yeah.
It will know, right? It's going to become proactive.
That's what you want, right?
Yes.
Or is it what you want?
I think it is. I think it is, right?
Yeah. I guess it depends on the person.
And it depends on how annoying and
right.
Intrusive it is, right?
Is that more or less useful than the typed AI interactions that you have?
I don't think people can type. So
right.
The only thing that saves it is most people who are typing to AI are doing it on a phone, and there's pretty good autocorrect, depending on the phone. And that might save it a little bit. And I watched my kids. My kids are like, they draw straight lines and words appear. I don't even know how they do it. And it's kind of astonishing. So I guess if you're younger than I am, maybe it's even better. I don't know. But yeah, my initial reaction to typing was, I'm a writer. And I was like, what is this? No one's going to type,
right?
Complicated things to an AI. But actually, so what do I know? I know people are doing it, I guess.
Oh, I use it all the time.
Yep.
I'm fascinated by this. I understand it's not yet complete.
No, but you see those moments where you're like, okay.
Once in a while, it's like,
and you can tell, it's getting there, and it's happening so fast. Whatever complaint you have today might be out of date.
That's
2 weeks
from Ray Kurzweil's book, which we're going to interview him. Even experts in the field have been surprised by many of the recent breakthroughs in AI.
That's right.
They seem to occur suddenly without much warning. Like we didn't even, what? Right?
I know. Which, by the way, feels like, I know, Richard, I know. I just got to qualify this by saying I know. But it feels like intelligence. It feels like developing intelligence. It feels like
Well, he also points out there's an interesting thing that before the AI can do it, you say, oh, yeah, that's very human. No AI is going to do it. He talks about an expert named Poggio, Tommaso Poggio, MIT expert in AI in 2014 said, the ability to describe the content of an image would be one of the most intellectually challenging things of all for a machine to do.
And now it's
not going to happen. Almost the next day.
Yeah.
Right.
Google
the on-device offline version of that updates on my laptop every 3 days.
But his point is, and then what happens humans do is, oh, well, that wasn't that hard.
Right.
Right? That we're
going to be doing this until we are all in caves with barely fire. And we're going to be like, I just still don't think it's that smart.
Right. Of course.
And they're flying over some spaceships like it's,
Yeah, of course it beat the best champions of chess and Go in the world. Of course it did. It's just a calculation. You know? Yeah. Of course it can make images, but is it human?
Of course it can do my job. But I mean,
yeah, that's where it's going.
My job's ludicrous. I mean, what does that mean?
That's where it's going. Yeah.
I know. It's crazy.
It's very, very interesting.
Now, I was down on campus the past 2 days, and I'll tell you, it's not happening magically. There's a whole lot of people working really hard.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But even and Stephen Wolfram said this a couple of weeks ago on Intelligent Machines. Even the experts at OpenAI,
I think this is the point.
Were surprised.
They're surprised. Exactly.
When ChatGPT 3.5 came out,
this
it was
is like
Whoa.
Like people you don't want to be
built it,
surprised
but-
by things.
Whoa.
Those guys, the doctor
Can't believe
operating
we
on
made
you who
that
goes,
work.
whoa, I've never seen that before. You're like, no, dude, what the, like, what?
We've all written code where, it's not going to run the first time. And when it does, you go, ooh, it worked.
You actually, but usually pretty deeply suspicious.
This is going to,
exactly. That can't be right.
This is going to come up in my tip at the end, but I wrote code that was doing the opposite of what it should do. And I went through it and I was like, no, this is wrong. I took it out and then it worked properly, and that should not happen, right? So I had that moment where I was like, and it turns out it was somewhere else. It was some code somewhere else was doing it, but it was like I had this one moment where I was like, okay, I have now proven that computer science is magic, and now now I need to bring it to the world. Yeah. And it was just a human error, but
it's fun
that AI helped me find, ironically.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to get back to AI. We do have a bunch more AI stuff.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk browsers. How about that?
Wait, first.
Oh, no. Remote desktop.
Yes. So, yes. In the list of things that Microsoft community folks could be outraged by the most, Skype, right? Mm-hmm. Which my wife, as I told the story, said they still make Skype, but now in our world, you learn of every single human being that still uses Skype, outraged that they would kill this thing that no one is using. And be most outraged that the feature they want to use is the thing that nobody really needs that much anymore, and whatever. So there's outrage there. The new Outlook, the perennial favorite, Windows 11 falls into this list as Windows 10 goes out the door. Windows 10, which debuted with a UI that came from a phone that hasn't existed in a decade, somehow is now nostalgic or beloved, and it's just the ugliest, plainest looking thing in the world, but whatever. But now we have a new one. This might, I don't think it's going to beat them all, but it's definitely going to make the top 5, which is
the admins are anxious. Let me tell you.
Yeah, the remote desktop app, right? So Microsoft announced something called the Windows app, which I have to say, everybody loves the name. It's completely obvious what it does. It's no problem. You can run the Windows app on Android. It's hilarious. The jokes never stop. But in sometime last year, they announced that they would replace the remote desktop app with the Windows app. And then they released the first stable version of the Windows app just before Ignite last year, if I remember correctly. So the Windows app is a way to access remote instances of Windows in the cloud, right? So that's Windows 365, Azure Virtual Desktop, which is sort of the predecessor to Windows 365, and then the Microsoft Dev Box, which is where you can get the big honking computers to run Visual Studio on and test things against different configurations. Sorry. But when I hear remote desktop, what I think of is that feature that's been in Windows since, I don't know, NT something, probably, certainly Windows XP. And actually, that remote desktop is actually still in Windows. If you run remote desktop from your start menu, you'll see a Windows Vista UI, which has inexplicably lasted forever. I wrote a tip last year about how you can connect to another PC on a home network or the same network when you sign in with a Microsoft account. This is part of the problem with this technology. It predates Microsoft account sign-ins. It only works with local accounts natively. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of work around it, right? That's not the thing they're getting rid of. That's going to still be in Windows. If you go to the Microsoft store, you'll find something called the Remote Desktop app. And I believe when that was first created, it's a store app. It was supposed to be a modern replacement for that thing that's in Windows, but it never did replace it. I believe it does still work with what I'll call local computers. Local meaning they're on your current network, typically a home network, right? The Windows app does not support that, interestingly, which explains the outrage, because the thing I'm describing, where I'm sitting like I am now on a home network and I'm on this computer and I want to access a file share on the laptop over there or whatever it is, almost nobody does this.
Yeah.
That said, the people listening or watching the show represent probably a high percentage of people who do that. And they're the people who still do that. And of course, IT admins and whatever else. So there is some outrage there. They will be adding this capability to the Windows app. And in the meantime, they are recommending that users use the remote desktop app that's in Windows, the one that I believe debuted in XP until they add that to the Windows app. So
Yeah, which is called remote desktop connection.
Yes, thank you. Yep. So fun.
I kept the local copy of the installer for the remote desktop manager, which was the fancy version that allowed you to manage multiple services for a long time. But
yeah, right. I mean,
you know what really got me using less RDP? Not having any servers.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I honestly, I bet RDP usage exploded when they added Server Core to Windows Server, because that was headless. Essentially, it had just a command box or whatever. I'm trying to remember when that was. About 2000, was it
2008 had
2008, along with and then Hyper-V followed shortly thereafter. Yeah, so so it probably had a resurgence whenever that was. That was like 18 years ago, 18 years ago. Woof. It's tough getting old.
And the other tool in 2018 was Windows Admin Center, which was really supposed to be the thing that got us away from RDP.
Everyone hates it.
Command and control.
No, that's not fair. I'm sorry.
It's you know what it suffered from? It uses the plugin model, which means every single time you opened it, there were 47 things to update. And it was going to do them sequentially, and you were going to wait.
That's why I love using this laptop for Windows Weekly, because every time I log in, Notion has to update, Discord has to update, my web browser has to update. Like I can't just use the computer. Apparently my career is 50% managing updates or something. I don't know.
Now you literally want to half an hour before the show, open everything and let it twitch for a while.
I am not that kind of person, but I will say today, I was reading this morning, I looked over at this thing. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do exactly what you just said. I'm going to turn this thing on. And I had the Patch Tuesday updates. It was great. This computer was busy.
When all of that
morning.
is done, reboot the machine.
Oh yeah.
And then
of course. Oh, and just since we're talking about it, I saw something today I'd never seen. So if you're using Windows 11, 10 does a version of this too, but it's super common in 10. There's a checkbox in settings you can use to turn this off. But when you do a Windows update or you reboot your computer, you log in and it throws up that Windows setup looking screen. It's like, hey, we'd love to see you set up Windows backup or, whatever. Yeah. And you're like, remind me in 3 days. And I do that every single time. And today that screen came up and it was blank. And so I sat here for about 60 seconds looking at it thinking, surely it's going to.
You're going to ask me to do something. Ask me to do something.
Looking and I'm thinking, Lunar Lake, you'll never learn. Meteor Lake. Sorry, not Lunar Lake. And I had to turn it off and then turn it on again in Windows. Yep. Okay. So what else can I complain about? Oh, right. So
there's always something.
the web browser thing. So last week, Leo mentioned, I almost said Arc.
Zen browser.
Zen browser. Right.
Yeah.
And I had come across, I'd come across something called Sidekick, which, by the way, may not be supported anymore. I've only recently found out. And I mentioned Opera Air. And I decided to do an episode of Hands on Windows about the new browsers. When Arc came out, it was very interesting to me because as these people say, that the browser company and others will say too, web browsers are the most used app there is, right?
But there's no economic upside.
But also, there is if you are. No, you can't charge for it. But it's bizarre that the basic UI has not changed in 30 years.
Right? That's true. Yes.
I've been really confused about this, and it's fair to say that Arc was a bridge too far for a lot of people. There were people like Leo and others who saw it.
I loved it.
God, I
fell in love with it.
This is what I want. And they say that too. They're like, look, for some percentage of the people, nailed it. But the other 80% or whatever is like, oh, that's too much, right?
Yeah, Lisa's still using Chrome.
Yeah, and that's so is 60, 70% of the whole world, right? So
totally dominant. Yep.
I had, I started wondering, we're starting to see these kind of, they're almost like third tier companies, right? So you have the browser, the platform makers, Apple, Google, Microsoft, that have a browser, and it kind of behooves them not to be radical here, right? Like they're trying to keep people in their little gigantic ecosystems, really.
Yeah, I feel comfortable. I recognize it. It's familiar. I get it. Yeah.
But the job of the browser from those companies' perspective is to capture your digital effluent so they can monetize it.
That's right.
So it's like a giant
if you notice
pipe.
It's a
is that
mistake.
what you're saying?
But I think something's going to change with browsers, and browser makers or Yeah, no, browser makers are starting to talk about how these things will become agentic, right? Mm-hmm. So a week or two ago, I mentioned that Opera talked about, hadn't released yet, but discussed how their agent in their browser will work. And it will go out and browse the web for you. You'll say, I want to buy 10 pairs of socks, whatever. And you give it some parameters and it actually does the browsing. Like it understands the browser. It does it for you. It's not taking screenshots and doing stuff like that. It's actually using the browser.
If you think about it, that's not so far from what we're already doing. I mean, if I search with Perplexity, it gives me a bunch of footnotes with links, and there's no reason why it couldn't follow those links.
We're in a weird little space today where things are transitioning. So sometimes with AI, you'll say, I want to do whatever the thing is, right?
Right.
And sometimes it will do it for you. And sometimes it will say, this is how you do it in the app as you're talking about. Right? So we're kind of making that transition.
I do that all the time. I'll say, well, okay, in Linux, I need to install Mosh. How do I do that? And it will give me a step-by-step, which I will then type in.
Copy, paste.
No reason it couldn't just type it in.
Could you just do it? Which I think is the Windows action thing they're doing in Copilot, right?
Yeah.
Don't tell me how to enable dark mode. Just enable dark mode, that kind of thing.
Right.
But a side topic to this is our declining attention spans, right? I'm a lifelong reader.
We're getting stupider and stupider.
No, well,
that's what's really
look, we are, but I'm not 100% sure this is any different than it was 50, 100, 200. You could find any generation and be like, oh, the jet airplane is going to make you stupid. You don't have to walk places. No, that's ridiculous. Whatever. But it's just a fact. I've read 1,000 to 1,000 page books. I've apparently written some. And I have a hard time keeping track of this stuff. So the notion of browsing is something that may sort of go away. Or like we may still call these things browsers, but they will actually be these things that go off and do stuff for us, right? Even something simple that we do have today, like you bring up a web article and you're like, oof, that's a little long. AI, could you summarize this for me, please? Like we're already doing it, right?
Yeah.
So I think these two things together, combined with what I will call minor advances in UI in browsers, I may be pointing at how these things will advance, right? So the best example of this new UI I'm talking about is probably Opera, actually, although it's not complete. But you have these class of web apps or services that are notification driven, which are social media, which are email maybe or calendar based, where today, in my case, I might have some of them up in my browser tabs, taking up resources or whatever. Or maybe I have standalone apps like for Slack or Teams or whatever it is, and they're running because they have to be running. They don't actually have to be, but they run because you don't know any better. And you're like, well, just someday someone I work with is going to contact me. I need to see that thing. But I think this notion of these sidebar apps, which could be email, like it's a calendar, social media, take them out of the browser bar, the tab bar. They run in the background, their background processes, and they just pipe up when they're needed. Or you could go over and click on it and say, I want to send a message, right? I don't have to have this app running all the time. Like, I think that's an interesting it's a baby step, but it's interesting, and it's something that like existing browser makers could do. Edge and Chrome both have sidebars, but they're like the one in Chrome is actually really stupid. It doesn't do almost anything. The one in Edge, has Copilot, has image creation, has a few things. They have sort of the notion of apps, but I think Opera is maybe the best example of this now, and is I don't know. It could be pointing this. I think maybe this is where we're going. I don't know. So I don't know. I'm kind of hoping through writing about it and then mentioning it, someone's going to reach out to me and say, "Hey, look at this thing." Like your Zen browser thing was very interesting. Sidekick, which may or may not be in
Zen's open source, which I kind of like.
Yeah,
and it uses Mozilla's engine, which I also think, good. We need some diversity.
Yeah, and I forgot. I didn't write about this today, so it's not in the notes. But I don't know if you saw, Mozilla came out and had their own reply to the DOJ suggestion that Google not be allowed to have any payments to partners for search, which is what's keeping Mozilla in business. And I'd say they made a pretty good case, and their case was based around the fact that, forget market share. Like, look at what we're doing for the web, and if we disappear, who's going to do that? Nobody. And you're arbitrarily killing us because you're trying to lash out at this company that has this dominant monopoly. I kind of see both sides of this one, frankly, but I unfortunately, Mozilla is sort of right now, unless something changes, collateral damage here. But yeah, Leo, I'm with you 100%. Like, I think this is important. Like, we want to keep this thing alive. It's important. Even if you don't use it, you should agree it's important.
Maybe we should be paying for browsers. I hadn't really thought about this. It's probably too late.
Yeah, Netscape was onto something,
Yeah, because
if it was going to give you control over the data stream coming from you, that'd be pretty darn interesting.
Well, and that's how they're monetizing. Absent another way to make money, they they get money from Google to use the Google search.
It's bizarre that, like I said, this is the most important app for almost everybody.
It is.
Yeah.
It's the most
and
used app for
and if you could poll anyone who uses it all day long, and they would all say the same thing. Yeah. I'm not paying for that. What are you talking about? It's free.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right?
I think about M365 Family could easily allow you to use a version of Edge where that digital stream is now directed for you, so that you as the family manager can see the digital effluent of your family too, which might make you sad, but it's
I believe that exists, by the way, essentially. But yes.
But even if you pay, and again, even if you paid for it, but it's like, hey, if you're an M365 customer, you're already paying Microsoft. I figured they do go down this path right off the bat with the new browser, except that it sounds like the affluent is just so valuable.
I know. This goes back to we had this conversation in the context of Windows, especially Windows 11. The browser I would add to as well, which is back when Chris Capicella was a thing at Microsoft and would come on the show once a year. I would say to him, "Why don't you let me pay? Take away all the garbage." And his argument, which I kind of get, was, that would be like admitting that what we were doing was garbage. And I'm like, no, it isn't. The ad supported model is very common in the digital world. And you can pay, like I could get Spotify for free, but I have to listen to ads. I think that's garbage. But I would like to pay for Spotify and have it without ads and maybe have other little things that are better, whatever. That is good. This is very common. You just adopt, and I don't, maybe the number is, I don't know. Maybe it's not just about how much is your data worth to us as Microsoft, as it is the collective body. And if if too many people do this, then we become less valuable.
Although empirically, it's typically only 2% are going to pay, so it's just not that big of a deal.
It seems
take
to
that
me
noisy 2% out of the loop.
I know, and the complaining, it's a win-win. I don't understand it. It just blows my mind. Anyway. So I keep Leo messed with my head last week when he mentioned Zen. I'm like, okay, I thought I knew what was going on. Now I'm like, I have to look at this. It is very interesting, and there's so much. It addresses. I feel like Arc browser addressed some issues with browsers, but also raised some issues that I don't think anyone was paying attention to. It was important, but Zen answers some questions or issues that people might have had with Arc as well, right? By being open source and based on Gecko, et cetera. So, anyway, I don't know. I don't know where we're at.
Okay. I don't know where we're at either. That's my problem. I'm confused. I don't get it at all. It's moving pretty fast. When you guys first kind of glommed onto technology, I bet you, Richard, you didn't feel this way, but I felt like, wow, it's going so fast. I'll never keep up.
I embraced it when I was younger. And then as I get older, I realize a lot of this is just change for change's sake. And we're making it up as we go along.
That's
that
true.
We don't necessarily know what we're doing. We release things, we put them out in the world, and it's like, just kidding. Nobody wants
just
it.
Throwing spaghetti against the wall.
It's the most bizarre thing to me is that we're still doing that with established platforms like Windows that don't need it.
But do you feel like you can keep up?
No. Nope.
Richard, you are super smart. You obviously feel like you can keep up.
It's unlike Paul.
Up is a relative term. You sort of have to pick your areas, right? Of what you're going to focus on. The story.
You're good at deep research. But
and I have the upside to 3,000 podcasts and all those relationships at Microsoft is like I just spent a day and a half.
Oh, that's
briefings of all the new products.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what you're describing is almost like the in-person version of what I would say about like programming or any other skill, which is like not necessarily that you have to memorize everything and know every fact, but know who to ask or where to look, right?
Yeah.
No, but now you're
Well, I
into
know
this
who to
weird
get.
schism where they've shown me all the next generation stuff they're working on, and I can't talk about any of it. And
So let's talk about that for a second.
Getting weird.
I just feel like I'm sipping a fire hose through a straw. I just and it's maybe it's because I put myself in the position of not just covering Microsoft but covering everything.
Yeah,
which is a
a lot. When Microsoft went through its antitrust stuff in the United States in the very late 90s, very early 2000s, I had to, and many people like me had to, all of a sudden have to understand antitrust, right?
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of law, a lot of whatever, politics, and
I don't have nearly enough time to read everything I need to read. There's so
right. I mean,
much
today
to study now.
Yeah, that was bad enough.
Yeah.
I don't know if I brought this up on this show yet, but I haven't written this, but I've started thinking about the times in the industry where I was so overwhelmed by ... that I just couldn't understand it. So quantum computing was the big example.
Perfect example. Yeah.
When they first announced Microsoft Azure, I was like, nope. The whole online, whatever we were calling it at the time, the .NET related XML, whatever service architecture, whatever that was, I was like, I'm like, this is the perfect time for me to get out of programming. I can't do this. I can't do it. I can't get it.
I think there is a certain, one way of dealing with it is a certain willingness to just be in uncertainty and not, okay, I don't get it.
I briefly mentioned this moment where the code was supposed to do one very explicit thing and very explicitly was doing the opposite. So I deleted it.
That's actually a good sign.
Well, I deleted it
It's doing something.
to do whatever, to debug it. And when I ran it, it did what I wanted, but the code wasn't there. And I was like, I'm like, I don't. If I hadn't found that, that might have been a moment for me where I'm like, I'm out. I give up, like, I don't know anymore.
Backwards. I'm in backwards world.
Yeah.
And we are feeling like the PC revolution, the internet revolution, the AI revolution. Like this is just, what you're feeling is it's the same caliber of event.
I do feel that.
I think each of those, yes, at the time, absolutely. But the truth is, I think they're almost exponential to each in a way.
That's right. Yes.
And I would have told the story, but a few months back, I was at some HP event. I was talking to Michael Miller, and I said, can you think of anything that has exploded as fast as this? And he said, yeah, the internet. And I'm like, not exactly.
No, the internet took longer.
It was big, but to go from everyone had a dial up to everyone has broadband, and it was just pervasive.
That was 10 years.
Is in many ways still just happening depending on where you are. I mean, now you can come to Mexico or Europe or Australia or anywhere in the world and probably get online with your own phone, high speed, no changes to your, if you're depending on your account, you may have to pay extra, whatever it is. But like, I just get off a plane now and it's like, welcome to wherever you are. You're online.
It's amazing,
like, nice.
isn't it?
This is not like it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Ray Kurzweil predicted that 25 years ago that we would have universally connected internet all the time. 26 years ago, he predicted it. Yep.
Well, he was right.
He was right. I want to take a break. Come back. We've got lots more to talk about. You're watching Windows Weekly. Paul Thurrott, Richard Campbell. But I do want to mention, if you are not yet a member of Club Twit, that Paul does this great hands-on Windows show. You can see the video in Club Twit. You can watch us do a lot of fun things, gaming, coding, knitting in our Club Twit Discord. There's great conversations going on. And you get ad-free versions of all the shows. You wouldn't even hear this little message unless you wanted to. And actually, a lot of our club members do listen to the ad-infested versions because they like the ads, but that's up to you. $7 a month, which is an incredible deal for all this great content. And most importantly, it helps us continue to do it and continue to grow. And we really need that. So if you are not yet a member, please, if you would, consider twit.tv/clubtwit. That's all. I won't go on and on. What do we have? We did a bunch of stuff in the last couple of weeks. I think Stacy's book club is. We're gonna make that quarterly to give me time since I have so much reading.
Well, plus you have to read. I mean, that's the thing. I don't understand how you can do it so quick.
Well, it's just so much, and I'm good at skimming.
Hey, could you give me the Cliff Notes version of this
well,
book.
that actually has been very helpful. We do have something new we're starting. Anthony Nielsen did this for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and it was great with members of our club, the AI user group. So we get together and talk about how we're using AI and suggestions and tips and stuff like that. It's a traditional PC style user group, but for AI, and it's in our Discord on the fourth Friday of every month. The next one's March 28th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. So if you're not a member, join so you can be part of that too. That's really fun. That's really fun. Stacy's Book Club. We got Hands on Tech with monthly recording in there. Chris Marquardt's photo. It's a whole bunch of stuff. Twit.tv/club. Twit. All right. Sorry, I didn't apologize for interrupting. Let's talk about something much more interesting. Microsoft 365.
Yeah. Is it interesting? So I think it was late last year, Google talked about some of the features they were going to add to Chrome OS for Chromebooks to make it better for those in a Microsoft 365 environment, which sounds oxymoronic. But that work is now complete, so to speak, although I'm not sure it goes far enough. But you can access the Microsoft 365 web apps, Word, PowerPoint, sorry, and Excel in Chrome OS like you can anywhere. But they're not, if you bring them up in Chrome or Edge or whatever, you don't get an option to install them. You could, and if you could install it or pin it, you'd always go back to that kind of Microsoft 365 portal site. So in Chrome OS, they've done work so that you can actually pin those things discreetly and run them and then associate them with file types and, kind of make it more native looking and acting. So actually, that's kind of interesting. Single sign-on pass-through, so you can sign into a Chromebook with an Enter ID or third-party authentication manager, which is cool. OneDrive integration into the Files app in Chrome OS, which is something I did actually try myself. That's kind of interesting. You don't get that local sync thing, which I think is key for this kind of service. But you could also, as an IT admin, specify that you can't even see as a user of the local storage. Everything will go into OneDrive, including whatever downloads and screenshots you have, and keep that stuff, inside the environment. So kind of cool. I mean, it's, you don't see a lot about these two companies working together. I don't think they actually work together on this either, but it is, I think it's important.
I wonder how well Google Workspaces works on Chromebooks. That would be my question.
I think it works really well. Well, look, there's that world as the commercial space, I guess, for lack of a better term, is kind of like two halves, right? Mm-hmm. There's the Fortune 500 managed heavy infrastructure Microsoft world, right? Microsoft 365, where you basically get everything from the same company. And then there's it's not really ad hoc, but it's like smaller businesses, startups, where you might go with Google Workspace. It's a little cheaper, maybe. You don't need the desktop apps, et cetera. And then you start picking and choosing other things like Slack and Notion and whatever else you might use, right? And these things work together to some degree, but they're not all from one place and whatever. These are the trade-offs. But at some point, if you're lucky or if things go well, your business grows. And the question was always sort of like, well, what happens to a small business? It becomes maybe a medium-sized business or whatever. Do they stay on Google Workspace or do they move to Microsoft 365, right? And I don't think there is an answer to that question. I think it's going to depend on the company. But I think this is a recognition that Google hasn't necessarily made a lot of inroads into a certain part of the market. And that's the part of the market that, standardizes Microsoft, right? Because for a while there, it seemed like Google will just duplicate every single thing that Microsoft does, right? Which is what they did in the buildup as they were, as we get to what we now call Workspace. But I don't know. At some point, it's like, well, actually, maybe not everyone needs all that stuff, and maybe some of it's a little top heavy. We never talked about this, but last week someone asked me about Loop and said, is this thing still a going concern? So I'm like, let me look into it, right? And if what you're concerned about is Loop as an app, right, the Notion-like app that you can run on Windows, it's a web app, or on mobile, that stuff's moving like a glacier. Like it's barely happening. But the thing people need to remember is that Loop is the front-facing implementation for something called the Fluid Framework. And it's this kind of component-based design, a modern Ole, COM, whatever you want to call it, of sorts. And there are other things going on. So they just added something to to Copilot, called Copilot Pages. Copilot Pages is Loop, but inside Copilot, and is designed to be a workspace where you can collaborate with, in this case, Copilot and others on the types of things you might, if you weren't using Copilot or AI, you might be doing in Loop if you knew what it was. And most people don't. So to answer the question, yeah, sort of. But if you look at it as a broader platform, actually, yeah, really aggressively. And the first thing that kicked me off to this was if you look up Loop on Twitter/X and find their official account, all their recent tweets are all about Copilot Pages. And I was like, why are they tweeting about this? It's like they're promoting some other thing. Mm-hmm. It's because it's Loop.
Yeah. Under the hood.
Yeah. So I don't know. I get that.
Loop lives is the point.
Yeah. Lives,
It's got that problem of there's so many different products inside of Loop, and in some ways, like its Notion client on the phone is questionable. Like it needs to have a perfect connection. Its authentication is kind of nightmarish. Yep. It has a nasty habit when it has problems of just making pages disappear. So you think you've lost stuff. Like It's still got it. You just
it's why, wow. This, I'm going to not remember when this came out. Leo asked a question earlier, and I almost made this comparison with whatever the thing was. Oh, Copilot. Copilot, well, I should say, Loop, to me, is the same experience I have when I use Copilot in Windows or Bing on the web, which is I should give this a shot. Yep. Maybe it has gotten better. And then we have one or two interactions. I'm like, right, that's why I don't use this. It's terrible.
I remember.
And then I stop. And so
it's like when you bump into an old girlfriend and wonder why you ever
you're like,
broke
why?
up.
And it's just after a few minutes. You're like, oh, yeah, there it was.
Yeah.
Yep, it was that thing. So, yeah. It could be a friend. It could be anybody. It could be a brother. whatever it is. You're reminded instantly.
Yeah.
Why?
Oh,
and
right. Now I remember.
Yep. So yeah, and like you said, Richard, on Loop on mobile, like I'd bring it to the gym. I have a copy of like the stuff, the weights and things I need to use in Notion. I made a copy in Loop, and I'd look at it like, okay, and I go to the next machine, and I bring it up, and it comes up on a blank page, and I'm looking at it like,
where'd you go?
I'm like, all right, kill the app, go back, doesn't come back. I'm like, I'm just going to use Notion. Notion comes right up, it works, and you kind of move on, So yeah, that's been my Loop experience anyway.
Yeah.
I would like it to be better. It's pretty. It's a good looking app. It's nicely designed. It's just terrible. And then speaking of terrible, so Microsoft killed Skype. The guy, Laurent, writes news for Thurrott.com. He's a great guy. And he pinged me and he said, did you know that Microsoft has something called GroupMe? I'm like, that sounds vaguely familiar. He goes, well, you know how they just killed Skype? Well, they're continuing to update this thing called GroupMe, and now it works with Copilot.
Sounds like GroupMe.
Yeah, a little too much, right? So GroupMe is a mobile group messaging app because God knows we need one of those.
Is it Yammer? Is it?
It's something else. It was an acquisition. It's something else again.
It sounds familiar. It sounds like something like Lotus.
You're like, yeah,
like Novell
Lotus,
Groupware or something.
Lotus GroupMe. Yes, it dates back to the 90s. So
Ray
Microsoft
Ozzie probably did it, but forgot about it. Or something.
Microsoft bought this company in 2011.
Oh,
that's how long it's been around. Yep.
And has it been a product this whole time, and nobody just knew?
I guess so.
GroupMe.com.
Huh.
So they're integrating it with Copilot. Jeez, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know.
That's all I can say. I don't know. So Build 2025 is happening in May in Seattle. But the registration is now open. So if you're interested in paying for this and want to go, you can sign up. And I checked it this morning. You could still do that. Or, in the past, this thing used to fill up like that.
It would sell out in an hour. Yeah.
Yep. Really quick. Like by the time I could write a story about it, it was already sold out, So I'm not saying you have to get on it very quickly, but obviously if you're serious about it, you should go do it. We don't have any idea what the session list looks like yet. I'm going to guess you're going to see the word Copilot a lot. So we'll be putting that one in the middle of our bingo sheets. It's going to be a lot.
By the way, this is a crazy low early bird rate. It was not that long ago that Build was $2,000.
That's right.
The early bird's $1,100. Like,
yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you wait long enough, they'll probably pay for your flight as well. So,
well, I think Build's had a tough time, and I know the leadership has changed. I know Hanselman's working on the content plan. So,
interesting.
Some of the stuff I saw this past couple of days make me think that the upcoming Build's going to be impressive.
Okay.
And Hanselman will show us how to eat chips at Chipotle, I hope.
Most likely, Hanselman will do the Hanselman and Rasinovich show. Like,
that's a fun show. I like that.
It is a fun show.
I bought a croissant today, and the woman asked me if she said the word Chipotle. She said it slightly differently, but that was the word. And I was like, what? And she was asking me if I wanted Chipotle, I think, sauce
on your croissant.
Hot sauce?
No, thank you.
Yeah, the answer was no.
That's a smoky chili. You don't want it.
I don't want that.
Don't want it.
Chipotle.
But some do, apparently.
Yes, yeah. Well, some people like to eat
Chipotle
garbage.
in your coffee? I don't know.
Chipotle.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had someone last night got a tequila espresso martini. And I said, I'm sorry to bother you, but I have to ask, could I have a taste of that, please? No. Could I, I'm like, what is that? I'm like, I have a slight cold, but could I?
Excuse me, sir.
The Mexico's a little strange. Okay. So this year is Microsoft's 50th anniversary. Mm-hmm. They're having an event at the campus in April to celebrate this, apparently. I don't know, a couple of months ago, I was invited.
Wait a minute. I have to show you this.
Mm-hmm.
It's your people all together.
See, I would have changed this to they think they're people.
This is horrible. I know. This is straight out of 2012.
I don't understand what's going on with this thing. I know. It's crazy.
This is the GroupMe.
Because does
nobody use it? Does anybody use this?
I've never. I mean, obviously, I've heard of it.
Oh, it's a campus. Maybe they're going after the college crowd.
College centric, yeah.
Established 2010 in New York City. That's their. Oh, wait a minute. Here's use cases. Campus alumni team sports. Yeah. They're going after the. Well, and then faith groups.
So in other words, groups of people that don't want the overhead or couldn't even handle it of an actual managed environment of some kind, but need to get together. Maybe we're going on a vacation together.
Doesn't everybody just use WhatsApp for this?
I think so. Yes.
Okay, just checking.
Yep. In this country, they do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I wish WhatsApp could just do SMS, MMS. I would just use one app. I'd give anything to have one app.
You can't have it be your messenger yet. Mm-mm. You can with Signal. I don't know why. What's holding them back?
I don't know either.
Is GroupMe encrypted end to end?
Leo, are you kidding me? I barely even know the name of this thing. Encrypted?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go back in time. I found the site and I went, whoa, hello. Hello, GroupMe.
I don't even.
So Microsoft's. What day is Build? AI. So should we do something with Build?
Well, yeah, that's a good question, actually. So
are you guys going to be?
So Richard is going.
Yeah.
I believe I'm going to go. I just talked to Mary Jo this morning about this because we've not heard about press registration or anything yet. But I got to figure this out because
haven't you in the past done things at Build?
We were there. We were there last year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, yes.
I like Build. Build was where
Build is my favorite show. You know
that we saw Panos Panay humiliated, and we saw we saw Richie.
When that happened.
Yeah,
I could have tripped him. He ran right past.
Stevie Batish.
I know.
Do the amazing explanation
and
that Panos didn't get.
Is less well understood follow up a year later, but yes, for sure.
So this is a good conference. I mean, this is one.
Yep. The problem is, as Microsoft shifted into cloud, right, super focus on cloud, Build became this thing where it was like, are they going to even mention Windows? You know, there were builds where Windows never came up, you know, and it's kind of shifted a little bit. I mean, obviously AI is the big thing, but but you see Windows because they're trying to push Windows or AI in Windows. So, you know, that's happening, but I don't know. So I will go if I can. I gotta.
Yeah. Sounds like fun.
Wait till the invite. In the meantime, however, so a couple of months ago, I got invited to go to a New York local Microsoft 50th anniversary kind of celebration thing, which if I was home, I would have gone to, but I was here and I'm not flying home to go there.
That's amazing. It's 50 years old.
Yeah. But now they're having the main one on the campus. So I got invited to that a week or 10 days ago, whatever it was. And I did actually say yes. So I haven't booked
4th.
this yet.
Yeah.
But if I go, it's going to be too quick. I'm just going to fly one night, the event one night and go home. Like it's going to be quick. But not interesting. Aside from just the anniversary related stuff, they are going to announce something related to consumer AI.
Oh.
And I think this is tied to some of the stuff I mentioned earlier with the Copilot features that are coming, right? There was a report this past week that internally Microsoft's in-house developed AI models have finally reached the quality that we see with OpenAI and Anthropic models. And this is the work being done under Suleiman as part of Microsoft AI, the consumer part of the company.
So they've replaced Phi or Phi with MAI, right? Or something. They have a new model.
Right. That's right.
We were talking actually on Sunday with Lou Maresca, who is working in AI for Microsoft. He did the really cool thing. He put Python in Excel. Which is super cool.
That took a while, by the way. It took him 18 months to 2 years between announce and release, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but what a great idea, right?
I mean, it's no Visual Basic, but
no VBA. That's
sure.
Goodness.
And he says he uses it every day. He's using the Microsoft models. I assume it's the newer one, not.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of them. They have the local models. I think this is their cloud. I think what they're really talking about, although they'll be both, is the cloud models. That there have been rumors for a long time now that Microsoft would like to figure out a way for Copilot to use other models, either mixing and matching or just outright replacing OpenAI where possible.
Yeah, for sure. They don't want to be dependent on OpenAI.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys followed the drama over there, but there was a little event at OpenAI where Microsoft was like, we got to kind of fix this. So they've been working on that ever since. And I think this is going to be them coming out and saying, all right, here's where we're at. We're actually, pretty far along. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. But that's happening in early April, right? So we're not that far away, less than a month now. So that's kind of interesting. Just in passing, OpenAI O3 Mini, I believe they make you pay to access this. You can actually get that for free now in Copilot by clicking that Think Deeper button. And so we're in a weird place. I don't know what's going on. But I think Copilot and what Copilot uses on the back end and all that kind of stuff is going to shift pretty dramatically. And then I think we're going to start seeing more in the way of actual end user features like those things I mentioned earlier, whatever those are, right? We don't know yet. This story happened late yesterday for me here, and I'm starting to freak out a little bit here. So I tried to explain this to my wife last night because sometimes I just can't stop myself. But in case it's not obvious that big tech is terrible, right? They're doing everything they can to move as fast as they can with AI without any regulatory involvement whatsoever. So, for example, in the past, this was 10 years earlier or something, Microsoft absolutely would have acquired OpenAI outright, right? But they know they can't do that, right? Because they'll be stopped at every level by every antitrust regulator on earth. And so they came up with this, partnership that's kind of a special relationship. And that relationship is being investigated all over the world, of course. Actually, the CMA just came out and said, it's fine. We had big problems with this. But the thing that made it fine, which is fascinating to me, was that announcement recently, a month or two ago, where OpenAI can use other AI infrastructure, which is actually kind of a win-win for Microsoft, right?
And that was immediately followed by the Stargate announcement, because I suspect Microsoft said, yeah, we don't want anything to do with that.
Yep, of course. And for the CMA, which I think we've established, not necessarily the brightest tax in the bunch, so to speak.
That's a lot of people stuffed in one car, right? I think.
Yeah, it's a clown. Right.
Is it a clown car?
It's only funny when it's a small car. I'm just saying. It's a bus.
It's
unfortunately,
the feet sticking out of the sunroof.
They okayed it. So anyway, they're okay with it. But other jurisdictions will see. So there's that. There have been overt, meaning explicit public things where, like, say, Amazon now twice has invested in Anthropic, right? So they've been upfront, I think, to the tune of about $8 billion. But the news came out yesterday through the New York Times, which filed, I don't know if it was Freedom of Information or how they did it, but they got some of the court documents from Google, US v. Google, that were heavily redacted. And they were like, no, we need to see we need to see this. This is public interest, whatever. They got the full documents. And one of the things that was redacted was Google secretly owns 14% of Anthropic, never told anybody. That ownership doesn't come with decision making. It's a lot like the Microsoft OpenAI thing. Like, it's kind of, it looks like it's kind of set up the same. None of that. It's currently worth about $3 billion. Their agreement is that Google can only own up to 15% of Anthropic maximum, which is less than, by the way, Amazon can and does own. But here's my question. This is a company. When actually it was the same antitrust trial. When this trial was underway back late last year, end of summer, whenever that was, it came out that Google was paying Apple over $20 billion a year to be the default search on the iPhone. And I raised the issue at the time. I want anyone to explain to me how it's possible for two companies to have a deal that's worth over $20 billion in revenues every year. And no one announces this? You don't reveal this to your shareholders, to your investors. You're a publicly held company. You have SEC requirements for disclosures. And somehow this is just a secret. And this is
rounding error, man.
$20 billion? Yeah. I mean, this is a major chunk of Apple's services revenues, which is their second biggest business, right?
Yeah.
This is astonishing to me. Now, this is a smaller number, but same company. They're doing the same thing with Anthropic. And by the way, while they're doing this, just in case they're not hypocritical enough, I want to remind everybody that Google CEO Sundar Pichai has, on multiple occasions, ridiculed Microsoft for using other companies' AI. That I guess they're not smart enough to make their own AI like we are. Oh, well, guess what? They're also using someone else's AI. Not exclusively and maybe not even yet, but they're clearly hedging their bets as well. And what is this world we live in where these the biggest companies on earth, all publicly held, are no longer required to disclose anything? This is something I bring up every quarter, not every quarter, but I see it every quarter. Yeah. When they do their financial results, which are not transparent anymore. It's a
joke, right?
It's just a bunch of made up numbers that don't have anything to do with anything, and you have no way to know where the money's coming from. And now what we're seeing is we also have no way to see where the money's going. It is astonishing to me. And so we have these companies that are going to in the US, in the EU, and elsewhere, and saying, "Oh, please let us continue making our AI. We just want to help the world." They're bigger than most countries by revenues. Like, how is this happening? It's astonishing.
I'm going to take a little different tack on it, which is, I think this is unique.
Yeah.
There's no monopoly. There's no lock-in on AI because all the papers, all the seminal important research has been done in public. So Anthropic doesn't know more than OpenAI knows, than Microsoft knows. It's all kind of well-known.
I think these are speculative bets that one of these or the other will somehow be successful.
Well, I think they want a piece of the pie in every arena, right? But what I like about it is, this is what made the PC revolution happen, is somebody reversed engineered IBM's BIOS and so was able to make compatibles. Yep. And I tell you, if IBM owned PCs, it wouldn't have been the same world.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not disagreeing with this.
This is orthogonal to what you're talking about. I agree with you. This should be revealed.
The reason this is an issue is for the classic antitrust.
Oh, I completely agree with you and understand it. I'm just pointing out there is another interesting side to this, which is that there's no monopoly on how this works. It's well understood, which I think is great.
But each of those companies that I mentioned does have monopolies, and this is how they extend them
in other
into
areas.
a new era.
Yeah.
So in other words, like,
but they're not going to be able to. But see, that's the difference.
We're going to find out.
It's not a monopsony. It's not a monopoly because they don't control it. Even China can make these things. So there's
I'm sorry. I'm with you. I'm not.
And I'm with you. I agree. This should be reported.
The problem is the attempt. In other words, what they're attempting to do is continue and extend their dominance through illegal means when you have a monopoly.
Right.
And yeah, 100%.
The good news is I don't think they're going to be able to because there's no monopoly.
Yeah, and I think I'm on board with that. I some time ago wrote something to the tune of, if everything is AI, then nothing is AI. And this notion that if, Microsoft adds these features to Copilot, but then I can get them free from Notion or
you can't own it.
Then what's the difference? Like,
Yeah. So maybe you could make one that's, I don't know, maybe you can make one that's better than somebody else's, but they're all, kind of.
We're very quickly moving into a point where almost any AI will be good enough.
Yeah.
And the ones that aren't will be gone.
Which is what we want. We do not want one company to be the source of all of this. That is absolutely.
Although, if we had to pick one, I think Microsoft would probably be the choice. I'm just kidding. They've never.
We don't want Microsoft. We don't want Google.
They've never misbehaved when they owned everything. What do you mean?
You think Sam Altman would be a just custodian of all the world's AI? No. But fortunately, we are so fortunate. I'm not even
convinced he's a person.
I know. But we're so fortunate that no one has a monopoly on this. That is really good news. Has nothing to do with, I agree with you, the SEC should force these companies to disclose because then as an investor, you have every right to know.
So the point that I would make about earnings is that the SEC has not changed the disclosure rules for earnings at all in this entire period. But every one of those companies has slowly every quarter stopped.
Well, if you don't enforce it, you might as well change the rule.
That's the point. It's astonishing. So now Microsoft's earnings, which is the one I pay the most attention to, is just a bunch of blunder numbers that don't have anything to do with anything. It's ridiculous. Like, you have no idea you could pick any part of the business you want.
It's the gerrymandering of corporate reporting. You just organize it in the way that makes it look the best.
Yep. Yeah. So right. And Microsoft actually maybe is the best example because Microsoft has an invented non-business called Microsoft Cloud that they created so they could have some big number to compare to AWS. And they cherry pick what goes into that, but never tell you what it is. And it could be different every quarter. We have no way to know. And it is nonsense. And somehow Wall Street is not just okay with this, but Microsoft is, as I speak, probably the third biggest company on earth by market cap, I think. Trillion something. I mean, 3 trillion, whatever it is. Ridiculous. Okay. Anyway, sorry. I saw this and I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I just don't understand where this ends. It's
insane.
It's astonishing. It's unacceptable.
But I mean, it's clear that I don't know how many people even work at the FTC anymore. It's clear that it's not going to change for a while.
Yep.
This is and the stock market should be going up because of that.
Let me check. I think it is. Yikes. No. All right. So
maybe investors are going, I can't trust anything I hear from these companies.
The only thing that will really kick off a change is a big loss. Is this secrecy covers up the fact that the company is failing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Suddenly it's failing.
That's a good point. Yeah.
This is,
there might be a rebellion from investors.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the little guys like us, but if institutional investors stand up and be counted, that's who has to enforce this.
Yeah, you make Berkshire Hathaway upset, you got a problem.
Yeah, they need to say, we need these numbers. Here's what I fear. They're getting those numbers.
Yeah.
They're just not getting it right.
That makes me crazy. The thought that might be happening.
Which really just, it tilts the playing field for small investors like us.
And there's never been an example where a dominant company has ever tried to do that. So I don't know how that could be happening.
I would assume that,
Crazy. Okay. I will get off of my
get down from that horse.
Soapbox horse thing, whatever it is. Google launched Gemma 3. Gemma 3 is like their version of Phi. It's the local model stuff, what I would call a small language model. There's a family of them with different parameters, et cetera, et cetera. But the big claim to this one is if you're hitting this with a single GPU or a single NPU, which you would be at locally, like on a device, This is actually the most performant AI in its class, followed by it's in a class of its own. Anyway. And then I don't even know why this is in the notes, but AI is going to use AI. Amazon's going to use AI and vice versa to dub movies and TV shows automatically, because of course they are, right? I mean, like, it's going to be used to do everything like this. I mentioned watching those Dave Cutler videos again, and I don't remember when they were recorded, but let's call it, 8-ish years ago. They, in the discussion about the future of operating systems and what comes next and blah, 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 someone asked him about AI, and he says, he goes, and this is before this current boom. He didn't say this recently. This was several years ago.
8 years ago.
He said, people are dumping on AI. They don't understand it. But he goes, I've seen miracles come out of this. And one of them that he mentioned, he called it Skype Auto Translate, which is now coming just to PCs. But this note, at the time, I don't think it was translation. I think it was just, maybe it was translation. I don't remember. But either translation or just auto captioning, right? Where you can just on the fly do that Babelfish thing, right?
Yep.
Amazing, isn't it?
Oh, that's stuff's incredible. And he's right. It's a good point. It's and that was before it got exciting, back then.
But the ImageNet thing had already happened by then. So we already were now expecting software to recognize images. Like all of that stuff that was impossible was changing.
Yep.
And it was the beginning of this generation. But it's finally gotten to language. There
are these stages you go through with this stuff that, and this is where the acceleration of AI is just so crazy, where you have some software, maybe you paid for it or something, and the software can remove the background from an image like Photoshop might do. And you're like, oh, this is cool. And then you're like, I can do this on my phone. And now I can do it in Paint. And now I can do it in a video. What? And you can go in and say, this thing is the foreground, this object. Now track it through all these frames. And then in real time, it changes or removes the background. It gives you basically a green screen effect or whatever. I always point to Jurassic Park as this line in the sand, so to speak, where I saw that movie and I said, now they can put anything on the screen, which to me at the time meant now they can make a Lord of the Rings movie, because this was just impossible. You could not do the scope that this would require on screen, but now
the
you
word
can.
Helm's Deep required an astonishing.
And I saw Jurassic Park and I'm like, if you can think it, you can make a movie about it. Yeah. Now they can do anything. And I think that's where but that was Hollywood, right? Hollywood probably had whoever, whoever did that, ILM probably had all these like Silicon Graphics workstations and whatever. Now it's like, I'm waiting for to pay for something in line. I'm like, I think I'm going to use AI to make a movie, on my phone. It's crazy. Like, it's just crazy. It's
getting out of here.
Insane.
It's happening so fast.
I know.
But there's still that effect that Kurzweil talks about, where as soon as a machine could do it, we go, well, that wasn't that hard. I could do that. We are making a lot of progress.
It's crazy.
Wild world. And the thing is, I don't know what you could predict what's going to happen next, because
I don't even try.
It feels like all paradigm shifts.
The joke, every single place in the United States and maybe on Earth has the joke. You're in Boston, you're in Seattle, you're in British Columbia. It doesn't matter. Don't like the weather? Just wait 15 minutes, right? We've all heard that joke.
I'll say
Don't believe in AI?
Yeah.
Wait 15 minutes. Yeah. Don't worry. It's about to get a lot better.
And we don't say wait 15 minutes, change weather here. We say it only rained twice this week, once for 3 days and once for 4.
Right.
It's a little more consistent.
Right. It's like we have two seasons in Mexico City, one lasts 9 months and one lasts 3 months.
You're watching Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell. So glad you're here. We do this show every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. We are now on summertime in the States, not in Mexico. And British Columbia, you also changed.
It's pretty hot following.
Pretty hot.
Yeah. So this means that we are now at 1800 UTC, not 1900.
So what time is it for you guys now? Like 10 o'clock at night or something? I can't really follow that. Yeah. It's
on Sunday, Mike Elgin said, let's just all do UTC and screw it. So no, I am not getting up at 1400 and going to bed.
I do a 9 a.m. thing with Brad, which is 8 a.m. here, which is now 7 a.m. And I'm like, nope, I'm not doing it. I can't get up for that. No way.
I don't do anything before 8. That's just not going to happen. Even with a Chipotle croissant, I couldn't do it. Although it probably does wake you up a little.
A Chipotle croissant, which is like just a random mix of words that doesn't make sense together.
Hey, glad you're here. Keep watching. We do stream, by the way, if you want to watch live on 8 different platforms: Discord for the club members, YouTube, Twitch, X.com, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Kick. So watch live if you want. If you're watching live, I watch the chat. You can participate in the chat. Wonderful to have you there. And after the fact, twit.tv/WW, or subscribe in your favorite podcast player. I think everybody needs an Amused Bouche right now.
Nice.
A little something
Citrusy sherbet too.
a little sherbet for everyone, aka the Xbox segment, Mr. Thurrott.
Yeah. So we've been kind of tiptoeing around this for quite a while now, but we finally have our first report that may be pointing to this future, which we've all sort of understood is coming, right? Which, because Microsoft themselves, Phil Spencer and others in the Xbox org have talked about this, briefly, right, here and there, which is that there's some future fusion coming between Windows and Xbox, which, we already have to some degree now, right? That there is an interest in these portable gaming devices. Microsoft has explicitly mentioned both Xbox and Windows as the platform for those things, that it seems like there might be both, right? We've talked about Xbox as a platform and this presumed move to, well, not presumed, they talked about it internally, to ARM. And what might that look like, and how that would be particularly good for a portable gaming machine, right? There have been advances on the Windows front to make the Xbox app a front end for these devices, similar to what we see with Steam on a Steam Deck, right? Or Steam OS. So Windows Central has a report that actually doesn't offer anything new over what I just said, but it kind of, other than the code name. So there's a code name Keenan, which is a gaming handheld that will look like an Xbox device, not coming from Xbox, coming from a third-party hardware maker. If you look at Lenovo and their handheld device that they have with SteamOS, and they had said at the time, I believe this could run SteamOS or Windows, right? Your choice. The question here becomes, it's actually a little bit like that thing we talked about briefly earlier. You are Apple, you're going to make the iPhone, you take this big monolithic OS 10 thing and you chop it down and make it smaller, and it's better for the small device. Is that what you do for an Xbox handheld, or do you go with the Xbox OS, which is fundamentally Windows platform, but specially optimized for essentially running a single app with a separate background service, which is lower resource intensive and gives all of the priority for what resources you do have to the game you're running, right? So it's a good experience. So we'll see. Right. According to Windows Central, this device could appear as soon as the holiday season this year. And it's almost like a test run, the way they present it, in that if this takes off, maybe we'll see one from Xbox. We'll see some from other companies. Not clear if it's really Windows or really Xbox, or if that matters, because I think these things are actually going to kind of consolidate, if you will, from the perspective of for gaming anyway. And then and they also mentioned that we're going to get console replacements for the Series X and S for 2027. So 2.5 years. So interesting. But so that publication specifically mentions that, well, I feel like I think they've actually said this. I think Phil Spencer has said this exactly. Microsoft wants to make it easier for game developers to create a game that runs on both the PC and the Xbox. That's the point. Like they're almost like a one Windows, if you will, like when they were doing, well,
nobody would do that.
It's silly, but a universal platform of sorts. When Microsoft did do that, UWP, of course, this was for apps, right? Not games. And the idea was that at the time, it was HoloLens, Surface Hub, Windows PCs and tablets, Windows phones, Xbox, right? You could write an app and it would run on all of those things and would adapt, right, if it had to, depending on the screens and so forth. So this is a little different, but also a little bit similar, right? That we're going to have this one gaming platform, probably based on, DirectX or whatever, which is how Xbox started. And if you can basically create a game as a game maker that maybe it's not the same exact, maybe it's one of those forked kind of compilation deals, but it's easier to make a single game that will work great on both. So that sounds like a good idea to me.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's exciting.
You think they just go directly to ARM?
I think so too. They don't mention that part of it. And I that might be because that part's just not known. I don't really know.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention.
Dev is pretty bare metal. They just need to do some recompiles and some of the hardware things, but it probably won't.
Yeah. I almost let this week go by without crapping on Siri. So I just want to take a slight break and make sure I get onto that. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, in the AI bit, I forgot to mention, Apple delayed the Siri features they announced last year to possibly next year. So that's going great. And I mentioned Loop and Copilot and Bing, and I would add Siri to this list. Please do not pipe up on my phone. I can't stand you. Where I use it and it's just laughably bad. I think I mentioned last week how we were up in the mountains, we were offline, and it actually popped up. And if my phone could have drooled, my hand would have been wet. It was that stupid. Anyway, sorry, that's a digression. And then Microsoft released a firmware update for their Xbox wireless controllers, actually about 2 weeks ago, and apparently it's caused a lot of problems. So there's going to be a fix for that. So if you're experiencing like latency or dead zone issues, those were caused by this. It's not your control is not necessarily bad. It's just drawn that way with software. So they're going to fix it. They're going to release a new version of the firmware update, which is something I've not done. You have to think if you use an Xbox controller with Windows, you actually have to think to see if there's an update. Like you download an app from the store, you check. If you do that, it will always say there is one because you have never checked. No one does. So don't do that yet. But wait for the update.
And why would you install firmware updates on a device that's working?
You wouldn't. But on the case of the Xbox console, you actually get prompted. You do it. I don't think you even have a choice. I think you have to do it. So it's probably impacting people on Xbox, not on PC. Well, more people on Xbox, I would say.
Well, that was the briefest Amused Bouche of all.
Yeah. It was heavy on the Bouche. No,
more Bouche than Amuse?
Nice.
I don't know what that means.
You got your Bouche and my Amuse. I don't know.
I'm all in HR.
You wouldn't be the first.
Heavy Hold on the Bouche,
brings the folder over.
All right. Windows Weekly on the air. We have come to that point in the show where we all look forward to the back of the book. Kicking things off, Mr. Paul Thurrott's tip of the week.
Yeah, I think I talked about this last week, but then since then I've written it up. I would say right now I still struggle to use AI for writing. And I don't mean to write for me. I mean in any capacity, even though I now have a lot of good examples about how you might do it. I've done some writing recently where I could have used AI to summarize something or whatever it might be. And, I'm just struggling with it. I think I'm stuck in my ways. But, I've been working on this .NET Pad app, and I'm working on the version that will support multiple tabs, multiple documents. Very complex. I've hit my limit intellectually and also just from a knowledge perspective. I did figure out the fundamental background thing I need to do to make it work, at least on my own. But I did write something about how I'm starting to use this. So if you use Visual Studio as you would for this type of an app, this also works in Visual Studio Code. If you integrate that with GitHub Copilot, which is free, right? And you can pay for it still and get more out of it. But for most people, you could probably just go with the free version. It takes over the auto, like the code completion stuff. That stuff is black magic. And I think that's what I talked about last week. It's crazy how good that is. Like, it's crazy good. If you write a comment, it will then give you the block of code to do that thing that you say you want to do. That's crazy. Mm. But when you don't write a comment and you just start a line and it fills in like a block. Oh my God. Like, that stuff's really good. I've also gone to AIs that are kind of outside of the product, right? So you can go to Anthropic Cloud or ChatGPT, or actually probably Copilot. I can't say I've tried that. Very specific. I'm using the Windows Presentation Foundation, which is 25-ish years old, 20, 25 years, has a rich body of Stack Overflow data, and people helping people. It's just awesome. Very specific things. I'm writing a C# app for WPF using the specific control, this specific property. I need to get you to do this specific thing. This stuff spits it out. It explains the code. It's awesome. It is awesome. And then I may or may not have mentioned this. I think I mentioned this, but I mistakenly used the Cursor AI editor, right, which integrates with Anthropic by default, but can also use Copilot, to do a code review of the entire app, which was not what I meant to do. I was not ready for this on so many, psychologically not ready.
It wrote the software to criticize you quite this hard.
Oh my God, yeah. It was but it was like, listen, I don't know what you think you're doing. No, it was kind of amazing. So
you said something interesting though. I love that it explains what it's doing.
It's the best.
That's the most valuable part, because it's not just spitting out a bunch of code.
Yep.
And so I find that very useful for learning.
The cursor thing blows my mind, because I had decided on my own that I wanted to further modularize this. I'm not going to use like a design pattern or anything, but it literally, this was the previous version of the app. I had already done some of this work, but it said, no, you got to pull out the setting stuff should be its own thing. The file operations should all be its own thing. And I was like, oh my God, I already did have that's I was blown away by this. Mm-hmm. And then because of AI, I realized that it's not a big deal, but I had this part of my design that was just unnecessary. It just was redundant, So I went through this entire list. So since that happened, I actually went through the entire list and I made the changes I thought I should make, and then ignored the ones I didn't care about that I disagreed with maybe or whatever. But this is I'm not a professional developer. I get it. But this has helped this project. There's no doubt about it. Didn't write it for me. What's that?
You've upped your coding game.
Yeah, it really. Yeah. I know enough about it to know that this is incredibly it's just incredible. If you're a developer ignoring this, you're just hurting yourself. You're being stupid.
We're sort of at a point now where you're not employable if you're not using it.
Yep. You still have to know what you're doing.
One of the groups I talked to yesterday were the guys working on the Visual Studio Code Insiders Edition. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you've played with that, but if you want to see some of the new stuff happening in that space, it's showing up in the Insiders.
I've only looked at it. There's I think it's an extension. It might be called, well, I don't know. I'm always on the wrong computer. I think it's called AI. It's not AI Studio. It's some kind of AI add-in, but it allows you to run local AI models within.
Yeah. They're all using Claude.
You can pick. The thing that's cool about it is you can filter what you're getting. So in my case, because I have the Snapdragon thing, I can say, I want a local AI that specifically targets the NPU. Mm-hmm. And that shrinks it down nicely, by the way. Yeah. It's like 3 choices. But then you can interact with it. Of course, you can write code to it. You can do that. But you can interact with it in a chat interface as if you were using like Anthropic Cloud or ChatGPT. Whatever. It's fascinating. Anyway, that stuff is really cool. Don't be stupid. Just look at this stuff. Super good. And then two things.
You wouldn't let it completely rewrite your code.
No. So by the way, you could do that. Now, for an app, this app, which I would have described as a simple app, is actually fairly complex now. And I don't know. No. But Brad described to me how we used I don't know if it was ChatGPT, I think it was ChatGPT, to write a game. And, you're not going to ship it to a store or anything, but his kid plays it now. And it's basically like a Tetris type game. And in that case too, he mentioned explicitly that it had a coding problem where the blocks could fall below the part you could see on screen. And he looked at the code and figured out where to change that and fixed it. But I think even the most cynical developer on earth would be shocked by what this can do. And that the right way to use it now, at least, is you're trying to get over the hump of something, whatever it is. You can't figure something out. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Ask it. And I think I used the Mark Razinovich example where he said, good, now make it better. Good, now make it better. Good, now. Oh, there it is. It's perfect. it's kind of astonishing how little direction you could give it, but you berate it a couple times, and then it's like, no, it's perfect. It's
you suffered sufficiently. This will do.
Right. It's better than you think it is, or you already know how good it is. And it's
only getting better. Like the work they're doing in that area is astonishing.
It's astonishing. Yeah. Okay. So for apps, I've got a couple. Speaking of red, Fences 6 is out in beta. This is the desktop organization utility that I have where you have discrete areas of icons. They've added tab support for that, which is smart. And I know from adding tabs to my app how hard that is, so I appreciate it now. It's like icon tinting support like you see on mobile, right? Where you can have that kind of stylized look. So you can have color schemes and so forth. So if you buy it while it's in beta, it's $8.99. I think it's going to go up to, I don't know, the final price, $15 or something when it's finally out. It's also available in Object Desktop. And then separate from that, Pocket Casts, which last year made their mobile clients free, and then, by the way, open source them, which is kind of interesting, has now made their desktop and web clients free. And this is the podcast app that I use for that's worth.
I think
kind of the classic.
I think it's, Patrick probably knows if he's listening.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, iTunes was completely dominant, right? That was the, That was the only way people listen to podcasts. And it was maybe 80 or 90% of our downloads. But I think Pocket Cast is now number 2 and might even be number 1 by now.
I wonder if it's tied to streaming versus download.
Yeah, by the way, that's one thing that has changed a lot.
Yeah, because
people are watching YouTube on their TV at home.
I know.
And watching podcasts. They're watching this show on their big screen TV.
I know. It's very interesting.
That's changed. I would never have predicted that.
I don't watch, let me think about this. Yeah. I don't watch a single video podcast in Pocket Cast. I think of that as audio. Yeah. I think of it as one of the options when I'm on a plane. And you don't commute by
car anymore, right?
No. So I have to kind of, yes. And it's worse when I'm here because, well, for a lot of reasons. But when I'm home, I'll listen to either a podcast or an audiobook when I'm at the gym, when I walk, when I'm in the car, when I shave and, getting ready and stuff like that. Here, I don't have as much opportunity for that because I don't go to the gym and I don't explicitly walk. Although we walk everywhere, but we're always together, so I don't listen.
Yeah, you don't put in headphones.
No, I'm like I'm paying attention, sort of.
I'm listening to you, honey. What are you talking about?
People way, probably
for future reference. It's a great thing about hearing aids.
Yes,
you can listen to podcasts and books and look like you're paying attention.
Nice.
They don't know. They think it's a hearing aid so you can hear them better.
Yeah, you're like, no, I'm talking to AI. It's fine.
I pulled up my listening methods for Run As, and Pocket Cast is number 2 behind.
Yeah. What's number 1?
iTunes.
iTunes still is.
iTunes still. That's amazing.
I think that's the same still for us. I don't know how that happens. Yeah. By the way, if you listen on iTunes or actually Pocket Cast or Spotify, please give us a good review. Mm-hmm. Review bombing has hurt us a little bit, makes it a little harder to sell advertising. If you like this show, just go and give us a 5-star on any of your, whatever platform you use.
Yeah. And if you don't, shut your trap. That's all we're saying.
Yeah. And if you hate it, just, go away. By the way, because iTunes is still dominant, that's where advertisers look. So if you are using
that's
iTunes,
crazy how, and it's crazy how dominant they are.
I know, isn't it?
And there's all these other things. Well, Spotify's in there and Castbox. Well, okay. I used Castbox for a while.
Patrick says, oh, wow. For our podcasts, iTunes is still 300% larger than podcasts.
That of Pocket Cast. Yeah. It's crazy. Wow. And if you add in you don't add it then. I'm sorry. What does Chrome mean? What's Chrome?
I don't know what Chrome is.
Weird.
Chrome is people streaming it probably.
They go to
playing it on Chrome.
Maybe. Yeah.
I'd also want to filter it to, recent because I think Pocket Cast has made some big moves lately.
There was a brief moment where those guys jumped the shark. They did some terrible things with the UI. I used that Castbox app for about a year, and then they finally fixed it all. And at one point I paid for like a lifetime license for all of their clients,
right?
Which were all separate fees. But this is great. Like this is a great app. It's the right app. They do a great job of syncing. It's really, really good. It works
Patrick,
everywhere.
Do we still have the issue? Some of the club shows, people were having problems with Pocket Cast. Is that Are we? And so for a while we weren't recommending Pocket Casts. Patrick would know.
There was
if that's
something
still an
wrong for a
issue.
while. Like,
Yeah. I think it's probably better, but who knows? And he says, by the way, Chrome equals website views. That's what they're on Chrome watching.
By the way, just real quick, have not had a chance to look at this, but it just hit my little RSS feed. The FTC is going to continue their antitrust probe of Microsoft that was started by the previous administration.
Huh. That's kind of a surprise.
Well, they also agreed to, or not agreed, but they're continuing their attempt to break up Google.
Well, that one is because Google lost.
Yeah,
like that's over. The trial's over. The judge is now.
I know, but
deciding
their
on
recommendation could have been like, well, we don't see a reason.
That's
to break
true.
them up. That they didn't. They said no,
They haven't fired all the lawyers yet, obviously.
yeah. We'll get there.
We'll get there. Just be patient. Just be patient.
So I guess I know what
good
I'm
recommendation.
writing.
Now
It's a time for Run as a Radio.
Oh,
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Richard Campbell.
a few weeks ago, I think it was for 9/19, I was talking about this bit of crisis that happened on February 11th when an update to server enforced strong certificates for Active Directory. And if you had been keeping up with your updates for everything, this wasn't a big deal. It was reference to a knowledge base article, a security issue from like 2 years earlier, almost 3 years earlier. And but for some folks, it did hit them. And for actually some folks that were very contemporary, like if you were using Intune ESEP, you had to configure some things. And if you hit that date with having not done it, it just locked people out.
Oh, jeez.
Now you could disable it. You had to go in and do a reg entry.
You had to know what was going on.
You had to do all that, but it kicked up pretty good messages. So I know folks who had prepared for it and literally sat in waiting all Feb 11, waiting for something to die, and they were fine. But I did get a chance finally to circle back with Richard Hicks, who's been warning about it for forever, and he's the certificate god in this space. I think even Microsoft calls him to get some things explained. And so we walked through the whole process and what changes need to be made and what the enforcement looks like. And the bigger case, which is that right now there's a reg registry to just disable it so you can keep going as you are. But in September, that registry will stop working. So you have a few, what I appreciate was sort of the way Microsoft is signaling this. It's like, we're really serious. You need strong certificates for AD to work correctly. And the issue here is lateral movement in an exploit. Typically your exploit is a phishing email of some kind that drops a piece of code on the local machine. And that person's probably operating with admin privileges because stupid. And they now do a lateral. And the lateral they'd usually do once they're inside the network is to attack Active Directory, because Active Directory is 25 years old and some people are still running it like it's 1999. And so there's known exploits. If you're all patched up, you're fine. And if you're not, you're not. But this certificate issue, there was just no software fix to it. You had to get the cert straightened out. Ugh. And so this was just getting this stuff done and the solutions to it. It turns out that through the course of that conversation, I was actually able to reach out to some of the Windows people themselves. So I might be having some Windows cert folks coming on in the next few weeks. To go a little further into this, just because it's a good conversation. And, Active Directory, like Windows, isn't going anywhere. It does need a certain amount of care and feeding to keep it running reliably and to keep the system safe. It should not be a path of exploit. And if it's up to date, you're fine. And if it's not, your bad guys can move on you pretty hard. And they'll quickly get an administrator account, and then you're really in trouble.
All right. runasradio.com, show 975. I think we've come to the most amused Bouche of all. Whiskey Bouche.
It's whiskey time.
It's whiskey time.
Whiskey time. Felt like going to Isla today. Just because, the land of peat. And specifically to Ardbeg, which is an anglicized Scottish Gaelic word meaning the small promontory. Which, by the way, there's only 3,000 people living on the Isle of Islay, and about a quarter of them still speak Scottish Gaelic.
Wow, that's
like
cool.
It's the Middle Ages.
Wow.
things to know about Ireland. We've talked about this before. It's kind of the warmest bit of Scotland, actually, in the sense that it's almost never gets snow, rarely even gets a frost, but it's always windy. It's only degrees of how windy. The climate is such that it's not good for trees, but it is good for peat bogs, which is why they dry their malt with peat, and where the peaty whiskey comes from is Islay. They're all peaty there. Now, the particular part of Islay we're talking about here is in the southeast corner, which is right along the coast. And there's actually almost 4 distilleries within just a few kilometers of each other in a row, from Port Ellen, which is the port area and one of the largest ports on Islay, and its distillery is actually closed. Then Lefroy, then Lagavulin, then Ardbeg. They're right beside each other. They're all on the A846. And they're small. They're little distilleries. They're cute. And they've been around. Some of them are around a long time. Ardbeg opened in 1815. Duncan McDougall, and that's from the McDougall families that had been the leading clansmen with the McDonalds in that area for the previous 1,000 years.
Wow.
Rented the farms in the area to grow barley and open a distillery. And the McDougall family would own Ardbeg for about 140 years, operating with just a pair of stills, small operation. The only time it really shut down in those early days was across Prohibition, when everybody was struggling. But it wasn't until the 1950s when this whiskey business was changing as a whole. And Hiram Walker, that's the Canadian company, alongside the Distillers Company, which is Scottish, made an investment, basically split the company, bought it from the McDougalls, and split it between them. And although by 1979, Hiram Walker owned it outright. But it didn't go particularly well for them. They tried to modernize it, but it's quite a small distillery. Islay's got its access problems. You really can only get there by ferry. So, heat and power and all those things are expensive. So it actually shut down for 8 years in the 80s, 81 to 89. It's completely shut down. And then reopened under a temporary owner, basically a private equity firm, who eventually in 1996 sold it to Glenmorangie. So that's the space side. And they tooled it up, got new things running, switched over to centralized maltings out of Port Ellen. And that's where Ardbeg comes from. The Ardbeg 10 that we're talking about today first produced in 2000. So the 200-year-old Ardbeg that mostly sold in the U.S. with the barrels and so forth, largely that company disappeared. It was reborn with Glenmorangie in that time. And a few years later, LVMH, that's Moet, Hennessy, Louis Vuitton, bought both Glenmorangie, Ardbeg, and a few others. And that's the conglomerate that kind of runs it today. And they immediately started winning awards. They had a lot of old laid up barrels and things. In fact, the most expensive whiskey ever sold in history now is an Ardbeg. In 2022, they revealed cask number 3, which is a cask that was laid up in 1975, and they auctioned it off and got 16 million pounds for it.
What?
Yeah.
Do you drink that or just put it on a pedestal?
That's a great question. Here's the scary part. How do you know if it's good?
Right.
That's been laid up a long time, but I imagine they probably thieved from it. And they made a huge more than £1 million were donated into the community in Islay.
I love it. I love it that they bill this as the peatiest, smokiest, most complex single malt of them all. When I generally think about drinking a peaty whiskey, because I have a momentary lapse in reason, it's probably going to be a Lagavulin, which runs at about 35 ppm or 35 parts per million of peat. Ardbeg is 55. Oh wow.
Okay, by the way, that's their lightest. Right, their supernova's over 100. That's a lot of peat. Yeah, it's sturdy, right? It's like if you had an urge to lick a dirty ashtray, this is the product for you. But the crazy part is, they've only had one set of stills the whole time until 2018. They finally built their second set of stills because they're gearing up. Because as they got themselves reorganized, they do really well. They make very good whiskey, but it is extremely peaty. And the Ardbeg 10, which is not particularly expensive, you'll find it for about $70 US, is only 10 years old. It's a pale straw color. It's aged in bourbon, like I said, at 55 ppm, which is quite high, probably the highest regular production. And the only way you can describe the taste is oily and peaty. It is a big, rich, smoky,
But on their website, the tasting notes are sea spray, tarry rope, and immense smoky intensity.
Well, all those distilleries I described, but even the ones up in the north, like Beaumont and Bunnahabhain, they're right on the coast. So they take a lot of salt with that windy ocean all the time.
Yeah.
And so it's often a character, these whiskeys. But let me tell you, you don't taste any salt in Ardbeg 10. You taste smoke. That's what you taste.
Wow. But there are people who enjoy it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's, like I said, it's a style, right? It's like, do you like this sort of thing? And when I'm cooking a brisket is when, so I'm already full of,
you're already smoky, right?
That's right. But I'm covered with smoke already. Then a smoky whiskey goes very nicely with that. Typically smoky whiskeys and cigars go together, but I don't like cigars. So I'm not going to do that.
That's because you have a mouth and with taste buds in it.
Cigars are fantastic. What are you talking about?
I am instantly nauseated.
Are you a pipe smoker? What do you smoke?
No, I don't smoke anything.
The new thing, I just read an article in the New Yorker, is these little white pouches that you put in your cheek. It's not tobacco. It's just nicotine.
It's like a tea bag full of nicotine.
It's a nicotine delivery system.
And if you throw it on the ground, it explodes.
And the flavors are like mint, coffee.
From the companies
chew,
that brought you vapes.
Right? It's sort of like chew, but it's not tobacco anymore.
Right. So it's just gone directly to concentrated cancer.
I was going to say, yeah.
Well, exactly. I don't know. The main side effects are heart disease.
Great.
Oh, how pleasant.
I was looking for something to do this weekend.
There's nothing carcinogenic. These are called Zins.
Yeah.
Or in Sweden, they're called snooze. And I just read this whole article about how it's taken the world by storm. Wall Street loves them.
Because vaping's fallen out of style. Right. Enough kids now.
Right.
So
it's just direct nicotine.
This is as pot has become legal across the United States. I always figured that this terrible smell of pot smoke would disappear. But no, it's just everywhere. It's like, guys, gummies are a thing. Look into it.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? Why do you have to stink the whole place up?
It really stinks, doesn't it?
And you know your dosage too, so no surprises, right?
Right.
Anyway, often get one of these as a gift every so often, and I will drink it, but I rarely would ever buy it.
Not the Ardbeg. You're back to the
Ardbeg.
yeah. Okay. He's back on He's back on topic. I mean,
I'm on topic.
He's like, I've allowed you to digress long enough.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Fascinating as always. If you're looking for tarry rope, we got it.
Yes. I remember a whiskey described as old leather and pencil shavings.
I have this.
Okay.
It's one thing if whiskey tastes like that, but there's wine that tastes like that. And that's where I really draw the line.
At the taco bar, they always want us to try like new things, right?
Yeah.
But I don't like smoky drinks, as Richard knows.
Yeah.
So it's like, you got to try you should try this, but get it with mezcal instead of tequila. And I'm like, no, I don't like smoky drinks.
Do you want some
the guy says, you should like it. I'm like, no, I'm with you. I should like it. But I'm telling you, I do not like it.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
You should like it.
You should like it. I like it. You should like it. It's like,
you should like it.
I have failings. This is among them.
That's hysterical. My friends, we've come to the end of this fabulous edition of Windows Weekly. Richard Campbell is at runesradio.com. That's where you'll find the podcast Run as Radio, or .NET Rocks, the show he does with Carl Franklin. Or am I doing that backwards again?
That's
right.
I
think I got it right this time.
You nailed it.
I think I got it right this time. He hails from British Columbia. You're going to stay home for a little while, or are you headed out? Nope.
I think we got one more week.
Okay.
But the grandchild's due.
Oh boy.
How exciting. So you're going to go into town for that one.
Well, we'll be in town for that, yeah.
In town. I love that with it.
I suspect I won't see my wife for a few weeks.
So she's going to.
She's already loaded a set of stuff over there. She got a bed set up for herself.
Is this her first?
First grandchild, yeah. So
I'm not ready for that.
In the state. Yeah. You got a little while yet. There.
I think so.
I think you'll be all right.
Maybe.
We'll see.
We all have adult children now. So
yeah. But yeah,
they'll find a new way to disappoint.
End of March is MVP Summit, and then followed immediately by the Fabric Conference in Vegas. So
We call that March
the 50th
Madness
anniversary.
around
March Madness.
Yeah.
Paul Thurrott's at Thurrott.com. Become a premium member. There's plenty of free stuff, but there's even better stuff behind the paywall. And it's not expensive. I've been a premium member for years. THURROTT.com. His books, Windows Everywhere and The Field Guide to Windows 11, are available at leanpub.com. And he's joining us from his second home in Mexico City, Roma Norte. You going to stay there for a while, or are you coming back home?
Yeah. I don't know.
You're having fun.
Beginning of May, probably.
Oh, that's nice. You're basically skipping winter, which is
I thought it was supposed to be an eternal spring. Come on, man.
It is an eternal spring, but taxes were hard from here. This is not easy.
Taxes were hard from here.
Yeah.
I started.
As I told my wife, we could probably just wait on this because I don't think anyone's checking anyway. What's the difference? Like,
well, that's not, I don't want to get on a list or anything.
I think it's a little late for that, but
when you fire 6,300 people from the IRS, it seems as if maybe nobody'd be looking at these. If I had a refund coming, I might.
Right.
But they want money, a lot.
I don't get a lot of checks from the IRS.
No, not lately. Actually, we did. We got a $1,200 check a couple of years ago. Then we got a letter a year ago saying, "Oh, that was a mistake. Can we have our money back?"
Yeah, we want you.
And you have 1 week to give it back, or we're going to start charging you double interest.
Oh,
Nice.
God. Well, maybe they should be fired. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they should be. You know what it is? It's a computer problem. You know that. These are old mainframes and stuff, and it's COBOL, and there's nothing they can do about it. If they would just move to Delphi.
It just hasn't been the same since Y2K.
Paul Thurrott, Richard Campbell, I'm Leo Laporte. We are so glad you are here. We do Windows Weekly on a Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC. Please join us if you wish live, but of course you can get it at the website, twit.tv/WW. There's a dedicated YouTube channel, great way to share clips, and, subscribe. Patrick tells me that the issue with Pocket Casts is rare. It happens sometimes to people who put their club feed into Pocket Casts, and he says usually if you just wait a bit and do it again, it will be fine.
Because you have a custom URL or whatever.
Yeah, if you're in the club, you get your own private URL that's ad-free.
Yep.
And so you have to re-enter that in Pocket Casts. And for some people, that was a problem. It's not very common, and it's easily resolved just by trying again.
Try again.
Turn it off. Turn it on.
Stay tuned if you're watching live. Ray Kurzweil is coming up, Intelligent Machines. And we will be back here next Wednesday with Windows Weekly. See you guys.